leadership, or should the party come together united against Trump-Musk? It's all ahead on the first hour of Boston Public Radio on 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. A standoff between the Trump administration and the federal courts is escalating. NPR's Kristen Wright reports President Trump's key issue of immigration is at the center of the disputes.
Two federal judges presiding over separate deportation cases are clashing with the Trump administration. They've scolded the government over its response to judicial orders and set quickly approaching deadlines for the administration to give deportees the chance to challenge the removals, or the government could face potential contempt charges. In the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, illegally deported from Maryland to a Salvadoran prison, the administration must soon explain to a judge how it's complying with a Supreme Court order to facilitate his return to the U.S. Right now, the executive and judicial branches are squarely at odds over the reach of their constitutional authority. Kristen Wright, NPR News, Washington.
President Trump is meeting Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni later at the White House today. They're expected to talk about tariffs. Last week, Trump paused significant tariffs for 90 days on most nations, but he kept in place his first worldwide tariffs of 10%. The president is again pressuring the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. He's also suggesting he plans to replace Fed Chair Jerome Powell. NPR's Danielle Kurtz-Laban has more.
In a social media post, Trump criticized Powell for not having lowered interest rates recently, a move central banks use to boost the economy. He then wrote, quote, "Powell's termination cannot come fast enough." Trump appointed Powell to the chairmanship in 2018, and President Joe Biden reappointed him in 2022. Powell's current term is up in May 2026. In a Wednesday speech, Powell said that there might be both higher inflation and slower growth amid Trump's tariffs. Those two goals are in tension. Fixing one could mean making the other worse. Powell said it's unclear which the Fed would focus on. While Fed policymaking is independent of the president, Trump has many times criticized the Fed's choices under Powell. Danielle Kurtz-Laban, NPR News.
Much of Puerto Rico is still without power after a blackout across the whole island. It's the second such blackout in fewer than 4 months. NPR's Sergio Martinez Beltran has more.
The blackout started at noon on Wednesday and left 1.4 million people in Puerto Rico without electricity. Slow progress has been made. Puerto Rico government officials say they expect 90% of the island to have power again by Friday or Saturday. It's not clear what caused the blackout. The last time the island was in total darkness was on New Year's Eve. Today, roads are chaotic. Gas stations have lines as people scramble to get fuel for generators and ice. Puerto Ricans are continuing to call for the government to cancel the contracts with the companies that oversee the generation and distribution of power. Sergio Martinez Beltran, NPR News, Carolina, Puerto Rico.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down 1.5%. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The number of migrant families staying in state-run shelters has dropped below 5,000, so says the Healy administration, which credits the decline to recent reforms to the state's emergency housing system. The Eagle Tribune reports that the State Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities says the caseload of families in shelters is down by 33% from its peak in 2023. That's when an influx of asylum seekers had the emergency housing system bursting at the seams. Boston Police Department is about to spend $8.5 million over the next 5 years to buy 1,500 tasers. The Globe reports that once purchased, all BPD officers will be equipped with a stun gun. It's a shift in policy as well as priorities for the department that rarely deploys those guns before. Until now, the department had 70 tasers used exclusively by special operation units. The purchases come at a time when violent crime in Boston is near record lows, and as Boston Mayor Michelle Wu cautioned city departments to tighten their equipment budgets in preparation for possible federal funding cuts. In sports, the Red Sox off today. They are back at friendly Fenway tomorrow for the start of a weekend series with the White Sox as we head into Patriots Day and the Marathon on Monday. In the forecast, sunny near 60 degrees today, clear sky about 40 degrees overnight, sun clouds and mid-60s tomorrow, sun clouds and near 80 degrees 80 degrees on Saturday. Yes, sir. It is right now 51 in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Pew Charitable Trusts, telling stories behind data and trends that shape our world today through its podcast, After the Fact. Learn more at pewtrusts.org/afterthefact.
Welcome to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude has the day off. I am Marjorie Egan, and I'm joined by NBC 10 Boston's, or as we like to call her, our media maven,
That's me.
Sue O'Connell. Thank you very much for coming in, Sue. I want to mention we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back at the library tomorrow. Jim and I will be welcoming the band Twisted Pine for Live Music Friday, ahead of a town and city festival that's happening in Lowell over the weekend. Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett will join us as well. And Sue O'Connell.
I'll be back.
We'll be back. Just can't get enough, Sue. We just cannot get enough. But we're joined right now over Zoom by political analyst Chuck Todd. You know him as the former moderator of Meet the Press and current host of the newly returned and reimagined Chuck Toddcast, which I'm enjoying even more times a week now. Hi, Chuck. Thank you very much for joining.
Hello there, and Sue, nice to see you.
You look very relaxed, Chuck, I have to say. I haven't seen you in a little bit. And you look pretty, just moving along with the flow a little bit.
You know, I'm not going to put you in an awkward spot because I know where you get your paycheck.
It's okay.
I'll just say that, let's just say I enjoy not asking permission.
I heard that and saw that and appreciate that.
Yeah, that's.
And I respect, don't get me wrong, you know, I remember saying something to a PR person that worked for us once. I said, just let me know. You know, I always know that, you know, when the company has to choose between an individual and the company, they're always going to choose the company. Mm-hmm. And like, is what it is. I said, just give me a heads up when it happens.
Yeah.
That's all I ask. Yes. About 5-minute heads up. Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
Before I'm thrown under the bus.
I don't mind getting, my paycheck and asking permission. But a businessman once told me when I was little that if you're in business and you can't decide what the company wants you to do, think about where they keep their money, and that's what they're going to have you do.
Okay.
So true.
Okay. So Chuck
true.
Todd, before we get to some of the stuff in your great podcast, particularly about China, where we're going to wind up in this trade war, you know, it's almost 3 months. It's hard to believe. It seems like longer than that to a lot of us, but it's almost 3 months of the Trump presidency. So what's your analysis as of today, mid-April, of Trump 2.0?
Well, I wanted to... I was pointing out I'm preparing for an interview today with Ben Wittes, who runs Lawfare. And those of you that sort of focus on all the current federal lawsuits, he's probably as good of a sort of expert at sort of dissecting them. And I was just preparing, and I was trying to go through all the amendments that Donald Trump has ignored or not followed. And I'm up to the 1st, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th. Mm-hmm. He hasn't violated the 2nd and 3rd anywhere yet. And that's all in less than 100 days. That's actually pretty impressive. I don't think Andrew Jackson, I think it would make him blush on that front. Look, I think, you know, it's funny about Trump 1.0 and 2.0, and this is something that I'm trying to remind people now all the time more and more, which is the biggest mistake you can make in trying to figure out what Trump is going to do next, what he might or might not do, is to try to examine it through the prism of Trump 1.0. I think you have to look at this presidency as something we've never seen before and not assume it's some version of what we already saw, right? I think the public thought they were going to, you know, I think those voters that said, I don't want Biden and Harris, and said, I'm going to try Trump again because Trump 1.0, we survived it. And I'm willing to, if that's what it is, that's okay. I'd rather have that than Kamala or Biden 2.0, right? Except they're not getting Trump 1.0. This is not what it is. There are no guardrails. It turns out Trump 1.0 had 3 key people that kept him on the rails, more than we all realized at the time. And frankly, I think these people deserve a lot more credit than they got at the time. One is the Vice President, Mike Pence. One is the first Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. And one is the son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Mm-hmm. The 3 of them turned out, I think now with hindsight, and, you know, look, this is why it's sometimes a lot easier to be a historian than a present day analyst, because historians get time and they get to use hindsight in order to figure this out. All of those people are gone, right? Jared Kushner, not in the administration. Mike Pence, not in the administration, very much so, right? Reince Priebus, he's a lobbyist now. And This is unchecked Trump.
Yeah.
And I think this is what made, what's funny is this is what Democrats warned of both in 16 and in 20. It didn't quite happen. Didn't mean he didn't want to in his first term. Now we know why it didn't happen. And this time, look, I look at all this retribution that's taking place, and it's clear their rationale is, well, they tried to do it to us, we're going to do it to them. And there's some truth to that, right? The expression, you go for the king, you best not miss.
Mm-hmm.
On January 2021, a lot of people missed. And now we are feeling the effects.
On that topic, Chuck Todd, one of the things that I think a lot of people could agree in theory with in Trump 1.0 was how America and business should be approaching China. Right.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of ideas that President Trump in his first term had that made you think, well, yes, we should be considering this. Mm-hmm. Our relationship with China is fraught and interdependent and difficult. And now he comes in as 2.0. And I think by all objective measures is making our relationship worse, not just with China, but I've gotten a lot of traction from people trying to acknowledge that USAID actually was sort of funded as a slush fund by John Kennedy to try and get goodwill, not because we care about starving babies, but because we want to buy people off to feel good about us. And while we are vacating these places, China is moving in. They're already we're building soccer stadiums in the Middle East for people. Right. So what's your take on the China relationship now and how Americans are maybe starting to realize that we have stepped back and that vacuum is being filled by them?
It's being filled by them. But here's my greater fear, Sue, is that Trump's going to cut a deal with China. And you know what that's unintentionally going to send to all of our allies that we did not bring along for the ride on this? We chose instead to essentially, we're going to go and have this trade war with China without our partners. In fact, we're going to attack our partners and make them contemplate, should we stay neutral in this one? Should we wait to see what happens? And then the worst outcome will be Trump doing a deal with China. Why is that a worse outcome? Because then that will green light the rest of the world to say, America's doing a deal with China, so will we now. We don't have to worry about America anymore. We don't have to ally with them anymore. So I think the way he's you bring up correctly sort of the mindset, I think, that Trump, if you would really look at the difference between Trump and Clinton and how they would have conducted trade policy, that's a big difference. I don't think Hillary Clinton takes a more antagonistic view of China if she's president. He did, and Biden kept it. Right? There's no doubt about it. Biden kept it, and I think this is mainstream political thought now. But there was a way to do this. You bring our allies along. I mean, in fact, Donald Trump actually did that in Trump 1.0. They got Canada on our side, get rid of Huawei. They got their European allies to get rid of Huawei, right? Don't do business with them. And we rewarded those countries. Hey, don't worry, we got your back. This time, there's none of that. And so it's just willy-nilly. And we might be accelerating the acceptance of China as essentially a superpower that it is morally acceptable to do business with. And I really thought our policy was we wanted to make it morally unacceptable to do business with the way they conduct business. And this is, but this is how Trump has changed our culture, changed our moral lines and our ethical lines. I mean, I don't even know what American morality looks like right now as a policy. I don't think it exists.
Not to mention Putin, but I want to get back to because you had this trade expert on one of your podcasts talking about China, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my takeaway from talking to him is that we've lost the trust of much of the world now. Yeah. It's not like we can have the Democrats do well in 2016 and 2026 or have a different president in 2028. Their view is that America elected this guy, not so much the first time, but the second time, and the damage is done already.
That seems to be his take, and that's my take, because you don't turn it around in 4 years or 8 years. This is going to take, think about all the distrust that exists still in America due to our behavior in Latin America in the 1950s.
Yeah, that's a very good
And,
point.
you know, I got a podcast out today that digs into the JFK files. And my thesis on the JFK files over the years has always been about the CIA is petrified that if you pull the Oswald thread, that you're actually going to end up pulling the thread on all of the terrible things the CIA did in Latin America in the 50s and 60s. I mean, the fact is, the CIA today versus the CIA in the 1950s are two radically different organizations. And there is this sort of fear that will only stoke tensions that still exist today in Latin American cultures. Third generation leaders today have stories about their parents and grandparents who they feel were unfairly persecuted by American infiltration and things like that. So it takes decades. It's taken decades for us to sort of win some trust back in many places. I mean, PEPFAR went a long way to finally at least getting us some trust in Africa. And now we're wiping out AID. And you know, just as we were trying to convince some of these countries, don't do business with China, do business with us. You know, I just think this is going to, you know, this is going, you know, we're going to recede. Our standard of living is going to decline over the next 20 years because of the decisions Donald Trump is making right now.
Yeah, that's very cheerful. And by the way, we should point out that it may have been a slush fund, but there are a lot of babies that didn't starve because of this, and a lot of people that didn't get HIV because of this and die because of this. So
I've just
the
found,
PR
Marjorie,
part of it, I get.
Yeah, but making that argument to people that you know, children aren't going to die or are going to die, they have not been receptive to it. So I have moved towards, you know, it's the economic.
No, we're
part
you're absolutely right, Sue. Look, we're a transactional
country
now more than ever before. You know, we like to believe we're better than that, but ultimately, look, the voters told us there's one thing that matters, which is why I think this is catastrophic to Donald Trump's presidency. Yeah. I do think we now, you know, I know how this ends. We just don't know how much damage is caused before U.S. Congress takes the tariff keys away from the president.
Yeah, I like to think, and maybe I'm being naive and a Pollyanna, but I like to think that part of the reason the other stuff about migration or China or USAID doesn't resonate as much is not because people don't care, but because they don't really know. I don't know anybody that would know these detailed stories about someone like this kid up in Vermont that has just been shipped out of the country that grew up in a Palestinian refugee camp and is not pro-Hamas. He's just upset about it. You know, do they really think that this kid should be treated like this? I don't believe most Americans think that. I think that they listen.
Can I just repeat the Ninth Amendment? The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Okay? I mean, our Constitution applies to everybody.
Yes, it does.
In these borders.
And people don't.
Everybody in these borders.
I must get 10 or 20, well, that's exaggerating, but I get text messages every day from people who are listening to me and Jim or Today Sue who think that these people have no rights. We don't even know, people don't even know that.
Yeah.
Nowhere does it say the word citizen.
Yeah.
And when they do those things.
These immigrants, people here illegally, they have rights.
And by the way, citizenship, you have more rights. So good luck, Donald Trump, deporting citizens to your prison, to your gulag in El Salvador.
All right. Well, let's stick with elections.
Yes.
And David Hogg from the Democratic Party, also here, our now local guy.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this with listeners in a few minutes, too.
Interesting.
You know,
has he resigned his position yet at the DNC?
I don't believe he has. And
because I've heard from, I will tell you this, the Democratic National Committee members are on fire about this.
I bet.
This is an muerta. This is going to be, and I apologize. I jumped in before you were told the story.
Well,
so
I did the
worst thing. Yeah, go ahead.
We're just going to set up that he's with the DNC now, and he is looking to primary some Democrats, which is the major mortal sin, as you say, for any party, not just the Democrats, for the Republicans, and looking for younger viewpoints folks to primary. Now, I come at this. I think every single incumbent should be primaried. I think it's good for them.
100%,
I think it's good for democracy. I sometimes get concerned that parties are able to put their thumb on the scale by blocking out people to run against them with the money and the institutional.
Right.
But Chuck, the idea of someone with the DNC proposing primarying other Democrats, I mean, I think you've said it. What else do you think about it?
No, I mean, I just look. I mean, here's the thing. Activist David Hogg, this is a good idea, right? I mean, so this has nothing to do with the idea itself. It's just that you ran, it's sort of like running for student council to disband the student council. He didn't run on this, right? And he's not going in here. He ran on here to help the party, and you're supposed to be a little more proactive. Go recruit candidates in open seats. Go recruit. I mean, nobody's saying not to do that. In fact, I think that's what the DNC members thought they were getting when they were saying, you know what, we do need somebody under 30 in here. That's probably a good idea. Have somebody under 30 in the room at the table doing these things. To use your position at the DNC to then attack fellow members of the party, some of these are actually members of the DNC, technically they're voting members of the DNC. It's not illegal, right? It's not against, it's just sort of, you were invited inside somebody else's house,
and then
you're going to flip the table.
But let's talk about let's talk about the idea.
I assume he resigns. Soon because and in fact, he could be a martyr by doing it and probably raise a bunch of money doing it.
That's what I want to know. I mean, I don't think, I have not been impressed. I mean, I think that the whole Biden mess was mishandled. Probably the Kamala Harris thing was mishandled. The whole thing was mishandled by the DNC. Before that, you could argue that they goofed with Hillary Clinton as well. The only person who was more unpopular than Hillary Clinton was Donald Trump, but I guess it was her turn, so she had to run for president. I don't know. That was a mistake too. So for those of us who are unimpressed by the DNC, okay, take him out of the DNC. But what about his idea? I am very attracted to his idea that the Democrats have got to be, Chuck Schumer's not the guy for the moment,
right. Well, there's generational divides and then there's ideological divides.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm more empathetic to the generational. I'd be a little skeptical of the ideological purge.
You would.
I'm not sure that is a way to win general elections, but we'll see. I mean, I'm not,
too far left, you mean?
I will say this. The same political analyst named Chuck Todd 10 years ago would have said what Donald Trump is doing is too far right. Yeah. And that this is not good in a general election. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's not going to work. I'm just skeptical, right? I do think the country, I do think the Democratic coalition is more ideologically diverse than the Republican coalition. I think the Republican coalition was a little more conservative. I always said, Republican strategists are to the left of their candidates and their voters, which is why in some ways they're better at presenting that stuff as mainstream, because in some ways they want to present Republican talking points, where they're more comfortable for themselves, right? So I think that the Democratic strategists are to the left of their voters, which is why they have a hard time, I think, sometimes pitching themselves as mainstream messaging-wise. But the party itself, it is while the progressives have a strong hand, they don't represent in numbers as many people as MAGA did inside the Republican.
Yeah.
That's why I'm skeptical. But here's what I would say. The fight inside the Republican Party for the direction and soul of the party over the last 10 years, has that been good or bad for the Republican Party? Not really, set aside the country, okay? I don't think it's been good for the country, but for the party, well, they got the trifecta. They won the popular vote for the first time in 20 years. So when you look at just the voting result, oh, by the way, they're multi-ethnic coalition now, right? When you look at the results, we could sit there and say, hey, these inter-party fight, that actually was healthy. So I do think an inter-party fight inside the Democratic Party would be healthy right now. I think in some ways, if you look at the last three nominees, none of them were selected by the voters. Yeah. All three were selected by the powers that be, right? Barack Obama put his finger on the scale for Hillary Clinton. And he essentially blocked a whole generation, Gen X. I'm sorry, I sit here, the entire Gen X wing of the Democratic leadership, right? From Booker to Bennett to Klobuchar, all those folks got wiped out by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. In 20, Was Joe Biden going to win that primary, or did COVID and Clyburn shut the campaign down before all voters got to have a say? And then, of course, voters never got a say in Kamala Harris. So I understand the pent-up demand on the left for, can we decide this for once?
Yeah.
It's been since Barack Obama that they've been able to defy party leadership. By the way, party leadership didn't want Barack Obama in 2008, right?
Okay,
So
Chuck.
So here we are.
I got to interrupt you only because we've got about 2 minutes left, and I don't want to miss the most important story of the
Marjorie
day.
and I are very disappointed that we don't qualify anymore.
That's right.
Very sad.
Well,
You want to go up in space?
No.
You were not
Elon Musk and the multiple baby mamas. I shouldn't say that word, baby mama, should I? I'm sorry.
God.
I mean,
But
he's paying influencers. We would do it.
$15 million, $100,000 a month. I mean,
Do you know when you read certain stories, you read certain stories and you're like, you have to double check. Wait a minute, where am I reading this?
yeah.
Like I had to. This is a Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal.
Right?
So Elon Musk. They're reporting that Elon Musk
solid to me
has been impregnating major influencers and paying them enormous sums of money to have his baby or babies, and then be quiet about it and not tell anyone
Because
with a non-disclosure.
he wants to reach Legion level before the apocalypse. So I guess he wants to impregnate hundreds of influencers and take them to Mars, I guess.
I believe there was an episode of Family Guy that dealt with this at one point, where I'm talking to my New England friends here, and I know there's a lot of Family Guy fans out there. One of the more disturbing episodes is Peter Griffin and over donating on this, and it's sort of an amusing episode. I mean, can you imagine this legion of Elon Muscovites?
Well, I like the optimism that your kids are actually going to listen to you. I mean, what kind of crazy optimism is that? I mean, great, you can have 5,000 kids, and 4,500 of them could be supporting David Hogg.
That's right.
This is what really frustrates me about him, though, is that he basically isn't a very good father. He's upset that one of his kids doesn't think he's a good father. Yeah. And he's been going on a rampage about it ever since. Like, if you look at what triggered him to become this sort of radical, he's a radical. I mean, I don't even know there's no ideology here. He's just radically angry. And he's decided, instead of looking in the mirror and realizing what an absentee father can do to a family, he instead wants to blame the woke left for not raising his child the way he wanted to raise it. How about you participate in raising your child?
Excellent.
Why don't you take some personal responsibility and stop inflicting your anger and guilt issues on the rest of us?
That's a great analysis. I think you should get a side gig as a psychoanalyst. Every time I talk to you, I think.
Can I tell you, I hate myself when I do the couch stuff.
I love
because
it.
I do think I'm not qualified, and I hate it when people try to psychoanalyze me.
Yeah, but you're right. I think you're right.
He's absolutely right.
And why don't we realize that more, or Trump's insecurities because of his terrible father?
But again, if we were available, if we were in the age group, Marjorie and I would totally be having Elon Musk's babies. I just want to be clear about that.
I'm too old.
Just to torture Elon Musk?
Why not? I'd take the money.
$15 million, $100,000 a month. Your problems would be solved.
You know what's sad? What? I bet you his DMs are filled with offers.
I know.
Not people outraged. Filled with offers.
No, I think that's true.
Welcome to the sick side of American culture.
It's like an episode of Black Mirror. There you go. All right, Chuck Todd.
Thank you so much.
Yay, America.
Congratulations on the podcast. The more the better, if you ask me. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
guys. Chuck. Chuck Todd, political analyst and former moderator of Meet the Press. He just relaunched his reimagined iteration of the Chuck Toddcast, wherever you get your Toddcasts, and also on YouTube. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to open the phones and text lines and talk about David Hogg, the 25-year-old vice chair at the Democratic Party, looking to unseat establishment candidates and lawmakers. People are freaking out about this. What do you think about it? We want your thoughts on what you need from the Democrats at this moment. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, and streaming at youtube.com GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Boston's Big Queer Food Fest, a multi-day happening celebrating the contributions of the queer community to the culinary world. The festival's co-founder, along with famed chef Tiffany Faison, join us for a preview. From there, the heroes of the American Revolution. We'll meet some of the black soldiers who fought for independence. It's all here on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Compass on the Bay, an assisted living community in South Boston for those with Alzheimer's and related dementias, with research-based therapeutic programming for those with memory loss. More at compassonthebay.com. And Hammond Castle Museum presenting Eric Pape, The Fair God, the largest public collection with many pieces unseen for nearly a century. On view April 5th through April 27th. On-site parking and tours of the museum available. hammondcastle.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Sue O'Connell, our media maven. Sue is in for Jim, who's somewhere today. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. We are not, though, we should say, at our usual. We're usually at the library Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, but we're not there next Tuesday because it's cleanup after the marathon day. And
some of the runners are still going to be crossing the finish line Tuesday morning.
Well, God, it could be. Sometimes, they
if I ran, that's when I'd be crossing.
Yeah, take a very long time. But anyway, the Boston Public Library is almost on the finish line, so a lot of cleanup going on around there. And I also want to say a programming note. We're going to be joined at the library by Governor Moore Healey on April 25th for another hour of Ask the Governor. So we were just talking about this, Sue, with Chuck Todd. 25-year-old David Hogg, you know him. He's a longtime gun control advocate. He was a survivor of the 2018 Parkland school shooting, and he's been on this show before. He's a very impressive young man. Well, lately he's been kicking up dust in his new role as the vice chair of the DNC, yesterday announcing his plans to spend $20 million to challenge members of his own party, whom he describes as ineffective, sleep-at-the-wheel Democrats. So as Chuck Todd just said, this is ticking off a lot of people in the DNC. But nonetheless, besides the fact that he's got new enemies in the party and think this is not the time for infighting, there's also been this sentiment floating around since November, the loss to Trump, that this current class of Democrats is not up to the task of taking on Trump. Cory Booker admitted his own shortcomings during that historic 25-hour filibuster on the Senate floor. Joe Biden reemerged yesterday, and I think a lot of people think that maybe that wasn't a great idea for him to reemerge. A lot of people are talking about Kamala Harris again. Well, do you want Kamala Harris again? I don't know. When she ran before the whole Biden dropout, she dropped out herself very quickly because she wasn't getting anywhere in the polls. Should she run again, or should we be looking at different people? We'll mention that Bernie Sanders and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who a lot of people think is too far left, but they have been attracting huge crowds around the country. Sanders had the biggest in his career. And I do remember back in 2016, we've said this before, but why not say it again? We were up in New Hampshire talking to voters there, and you were there, Sue, at the primary about their favorite with the person. And it was amazing the people that were deciding between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump because of the working class populist message. So I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to ask you guys what you think at 877-301-8970. If you're somebody that thinks Democrats in power aren't doing enough to oppose the extremes of 2.0, and this is not just about age, I should say, because he wants Pelosi to run again. She's 85.
Well, and Bernie is
Bernie's
elderly.
83.
So, I mean, it's about the energy and the message and the connecting to the young people.
That's
I think,
right.
And the future.
So should we be throwing...
And by young, I mean under 70.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's fire in the belly people that are going to stand up to Donald Trump and be powerful about it. So here's the question. Age, vigor, certainly the AOC and Bernie show seems to be doing, as I said, just great. Or is it better that the Democrats all stick together right now? Give us a call or a text at 877-301-8970. Before we get to the calls and texts, what do you think, Sue?
Well, like I said with Chuck, I think, and I agree with everything that Chuck said about how the parties, and this is about the Democratic Party we're talking about right now, but it could be about the Republican Party. The parties block access to the ballots on every single level. You know, we would have more Republicans, state lawmakers in Massachusetts.
Which we should have.
If the state party didn't make it difficult for people to win in the primaries, right? So candidates that don't, you can't get past the primary. I'm a ranked choice voting person. I think there should be ranked choice voting in every single election so that it can diminish the power.
Explain that to people.
That means you walk in and it's how people vote for many city council.
Yeah, Cambridge
right?
does it.
You go in and you vote for a bunch of candidates in the preliminary, and there might be 3 or 4 Democrats or 5 or 6 Republicans or an independent or a Green Party or a Libertarian. And whomever comes out of those, the top 4, and there are different ways that you do it, then you're actually voting in the final election from the candidates who have gotten the most votes, not who the party has put forward. And I think that really would revolutionize it. But that's not what David is suggesting. And to Chuck Todd's point, he has joined the institution, and now, like a real housewife, this is my point, he's flipping the table. And, I think it's unfair that the Democrats and Republicans put a thumb on the scale for incumbents, but I don't know that this is going to be helpful, especially if the Democrats are in the fight for their life, and some might say for America, when we come to the midterms, and with this guarantee, and let's not laugh about this, a 3rd term for Donald Trump.
Okay, here's some sound from Hogg yesterday. He was on ABC News talking about disagreements within the party. Here is David Hogg.
Certainly, I have my disagreements with the leader at times, but ultimately, we have to realize that we're all on the same side here of moving our party forward and getting back into the majority. And sometimes that's going to include having disagreements with what our leadership is doing. But ultimately, that's part of what makes our party great. We're not a cult. We allow disagreement, and we're not led by a strong man like Donald Trump, who says, if you don't agree with me, there is no place for you here in the party. And certainly, there are people who don't agree with me in doing these tactics either, but ultimately I know we're all on the same side here of getting back to winning, and everybody wants to see a party that fights for them.
Okay, let's go to the calls. Jane in Concord, thank you for calling.
Good morning. This is a fantastic show. I love everything you all are saying.
Oh, thank you.
And it's very timely, obviously. I think if Trump is going to run for a 3rd term, maybe Barack Obama should too, even though we obviously need term limits in general. And Sue, I love what you said about ranked choice voting, because that's one of my pet causes also. I think because it gets rid of the extremists for the most part.
Right.
And weeds out the nut jobs. And I'm really glad you talked about how the DNC was responsible for Clinton being the nominee, Marjorie, because I remember having that conversation over and over and saying, do you think that she can beat Trump? Do you think she can beat Trump? And imagine if we'd had Bernie Sanders, how more interesting life might have been.
Yeah,
So,
or Joe Biden. If Obama, I think, made a mistake by pushing it for Hillary instead of Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was a lot younger then, and he's much more of a working class kind of candidate. And as I said before, Hillary Clinton was the most unpopular person ever to run for president, except for Donald Trump. So why do you think it's a good idea? It's the sexist thing. A man can be a jerk. A woman can't be a jerk.
No, and a man can lose a lot of elections.
Yeah,
And still
I'm
run
not
again.
saying Hillary Clinton was a jerk, but she was very disliked. And you can't put up somebody to run that is disliked. It just doesn't work.
Jane, do you think,
if she's a woman.
Do you think that, what about the whole idea, though, that David has joined the DNC and now he's doing something that is really dismantling? It's almost Trump-like. Do we lose Jane already? It just seems very dismantling to me to go in and tear it apart. What do you think about that, Jane?
I was thinking the exact same thing, that he's doing what Trump did, which is like totally flip the GOP on its head. And the GOP is the Republicans aren't really Republicans anymore. So, yeah, maybe it's a good thing that the Democrats need that to be a little bit of topsy-turvy, upside-down world like the Donald Trump world.
All right, Jane, thanks for calling. Appreciate your kind words. We're taking your calls and texts at 877-301-8970. We're talking about David Hogg's plan to, as a DNC vice chair, to get folks to run against sitting Democrats for office.
Well, I think the one they're thinking most about is Chuck Schumer. And
did I say Hogg again? Hogg.
Yeah, it's hard to. I know you
that
think
double
it's
G
Hogg,
is
but it's
killing
Hogg.
me. Hogg,
like a pig is a hog. That's how I remember it. Not very pretty, but that's how I remember it. Anyway, AOC is, a lot of people are talking about her running against Chuck Schumer, challenging Chuck Schumer, and that obviously would be a Democrat primary, but there was so much animus toward Chuck Schumer, who, again, I don't know that he's the right man for the moment. And people say that AOC is too far left, but when you look at the kind of things that poll well, help for childcare. Do you know we got 32,000 children in Massachusetts on waiting lists for child care, for help and child care money? People want child care. People want health insurance. People want,
But you know what, Marjorie? Even Republicans want this, and this is the problem with party politics.
They want gun control.
Everybody agrees.
Yeah.
The majority of Americans agree on things, and we can't get past it. I mean, I say to Republicans who are upset about Donald Trump, you had choices in the primary. You could have voted for Nikki Haley. You could have voted for Ron DeSantis, but they couldn't win. And why couldn't they win? Because of the party politics.
Here's a text. I'm a 40-year-old who votes left. I'm stoked to hear that Hogg wants to primary Dems. They refuse to make moves, so force them. And then regarding David Hogg's effort, just like any sports team, there should be competition for the first string.
Oh, there you go. All right, let's go to the phones and talk to Ann from Cranston. Hi, Ann. Welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call, and welcome in for the day, Sue. Good to hear from you.
Thank you.
I think if David's going to spend a lot of money, David needs to find younger candidates to run against Republicans if they want to take over the majority this fall.
Well, that's what he's talking about. Younger.
No, he's talking about running against Democrats.
Running
She's
against,
talking about Republicans.
Running against Democrats.
I'm sorry. But if he's going to spend money to promote Democrats running for House seats, he should be doing that again in Republicans, the seats that are Republicans hold and are, either on the cusp or could be competitive, rather than eating their own.
Well, what he's talking about actually is to run people in safe Democratic districts. So he's not risking losing, which I think is an interesting idea. You know what I mean? He wouldn't be trying to, it would be like running somebody in Massachusetts. A lot of people think Ed Markey's a very effective senator. I'm not picking on Ed Markey. That maybe somebody else could run against Ed Markey and just be a little bit, but Ed Markey's he's pretty out there for a guy. How old is Ed Markey? He's in his 70s or something.
Yeah, I think so. You know what? We're going to hold on for a second here. We actually have some sound of David Hogg talking about what you're talking about from Frontline. Let's take a listen.
We are also focused on frontline districts where we need to flip them from red to blue to give Democrats the majority again, where there are younger people that are running there. We are going to invest heavily in those races as well because, of course, we want our young people to come into majorities. So we're not just focused on primaries. We are also heavily focused on red to blue seats where there are candidates who are aligned with our values that are younger and getting them across the finish line to give Democrats the majority so our young people actually have power to do something.
My mistake. That was from ABC News, not Frontline. But, okay. That's what he's talking about everything. But, I'm not really sure it's an approach, as Chuck Todd said, when you're invited into the House, you're flipping the table.
Yeah. And he's also talking about that young people are going to be most impacted by what goes on now, particularly when it comes to climate change. And, of course, as we know, Donald Trump is doing everything he can to make the water dirtier, the air dirtier, to make. If you had a choice between getting the same money on a wind farm or a down in a coal mine, where do you think you'd rather be?
Rather be in a wind farm. But Marjorie, that's always true, though. The young people are always going to have the burden of what the older people decide. The challenge, too, is, though, when you have someone who has the power of incumbency, and then you want to primary them just for the heck of doing that, you also lose the power of the incumbency that your party may have by sitting on these committees and having the relationships and the ability to do things. It's like our society, I think, is always flipping back between we want new ideas, we want these fresh ideas, and we should have these term limits. And, oh, no, we don't want to get rid of that person because they are so successful and have been there for a long time. So
yeah, I don't know who's the person I feel that way about now in the Democratic Party. A lot of people can't stand Ted Kennedy because obviously we all know about Mary Jo Kopechne and that, leaving her there in the water. But for God's sake, when you talk about somebody that got a lot done for Massachusetts and brought enormous amounts of money back and held enormous sway in the Senate, I think there's no one can compare to Ted Kennedy.
Lion of the Senate.
Who's the person right now? I can't think of anybody.
Don't know. All right, let's go to Jerry in West Roxbury. Jerry, welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Hey, good morning. How are you all doing today?
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Can we have a good connection? I'm calling online, so I don't know if...
No, you sound great.
Good.
You sound great, Jerry.
Good. So my big point here is not towards either party, but to all the people who stayed home and decided not to vote. That's where we should be putting all our efforts into luring them back to the voting booth. Because I think that part of our damage was done by the people staying at home.
Yeah, Jerry, that's a very good point. Thank you for the call. I mean, there were there were so many races in which if people that they expected to vote on the Democratic side have voted, Kamala Harris would be the president. So Jerry's right, people stayed home. But obviously, part of that was that they were not excited by her.
Another little secret, that's no secret, but another bias I have is I think we should have mandatory voting, just like Australia does. That you have you have to vote. You can leave the ballot blank, but you have to vote. And if you don't vote, you get a minor fine, and it's a requirement. I mean, I think it should be a requirement.
We should come to the Trump era. You don't vote, deported. That's what happens.
See, now I will lift due process for that. I'm fine with that.
Only kidding, of course. Tim from Natick, thank you for calling.
Thank you for having me. I listened to David Hogg last night on CNN, extremely eloquent and very, very smart. I was just really taken aback by how young this kid is. I know exactly his whole story, history-wise. I'm a 69-year-old Democrat, but I think like a very young Democrat. I say I'm so far left, I'm right to my friends. And just amazing. We got to get rid of all these old people like me. You got to get rid of the old people like me. Jim's right. I fought it off a long time, but he's absolutely spot on. I don't agree with anything that Jim says except for get rid of the old Democrats. Now.
Tim, that was a great call, too. You know, he said that to us when Jim and I had him on the show.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, and, of course, streaming on YouTube.com, GBH News.
The world takes you outside your borders and connects you with the most important events happening all across this big blue marble.
We introduce you to memorable people whose stories will stay with you for a lifetime. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Global news and inspiring voices that will keep you on top of the world.
Listen each weekday.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, Outliers author Malcolm Gladwell, and freed Russian political prisoner Vladimir Kara-Murza. BostonSpeakers.org. And Johnson & Wales University, committed to going beyond the classroom by helping students develop networks, obtain real-world experience, and providing hands-on learning that makes an impact. More at jwu.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm adjusting to the new music. What do you think of the music?
I love it.
Think it's
I'm driving. I feel like I'm driving.
You feel like you're driving?
I
That's
like
right.
it.
We want to be driving to the hoop, driving ahead, keeping brisk. Okay. Anyway, we're talking about... Sorry. We're talking about whether or not you think David Hogg's idea is to get not just younger people, although because he's saying he still wants Nancy Pelosi, but people that are big fighters, that are tough, that are going to get off the couch and really go crazy, and that their ideology matters, obviously, but that youth matters too, and they're willing to have vigor, as JFK used to say.
Yeah, my question is, why did he join the DNC in that capacity to do that? When
I don't know. That's a good question.
He could have actually, solicited progressive Republicans to run as well. Like, there are, I think Seth Moulton is with a group, or he has a PAC, I think, that looks for veterans and armed service folks to run. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this. It doesn't necessarily, of course, we probably wouldn't be talking about it if he wasn't a DNC chair, vice chair. So
well, Chuck Todd seems to think he's going to be resigning soon or pushed out the door.
Yeah,
one
I
or
can
the other.
imagine. So, all right, let's go to Marilyn in the car. Hi, Marilyn. Thanks for calling into Boston Public Radio.
Thank you so much. Hi, Marjorie. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
Sue, I'm also Revere High School and Emerson College. So
all right, my alma maters.
I know. So I had not heard this news. I follow politics very closely, but I had not heard this until this discussion. I find it fascinating, and I have a respect for David Hogg. I think that what he's doing is actually smart. He is stirring the pot for sure, and maybe, from a political perspective, it's risky. But as in any primary, competition is really important, even if the net result doesn't work out the way you want. So even if a new young candidate in a certain race doesn't win, it can move the incumbent to look broader. What's my message? Who do I need to reach? Who am I missing? Why am I not doing well? So I really think if we can't stir the pot now, or if we don't stir the pot now, when on earth are we going to do it?
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100%, Marilyn. I mean, I think one of the reasons Ayanna Pressley beat Congressperson Mike Capuano in that Democratic primary is because he hadn't been challenged in such a long time. And the machinery was, his constituents had changed, his machinery was dusty. So I think it's good. I mean, he's certainly a capable and very good Democratic leader, but at the same time, trying to be in touch with the voters is a hard thing to do. I mean, I just, the part for me is I just think that there's a much bigger world that David Hogg could be working in, recruiting people to run and challenge the systems, because the systems, the party systems are part of why we are here today.
He should run.
Well, he probably will.
Yeah, he should run.
After
Yeah. I think so. I hear what you're saying, but such a talent like that, if he is put out to the field to recruit people, we're not going to hear from him, and we need to hear from him.
Yep,
right?
good point.
This
yeah,
is
that's a good point too.
Message.
Yeah, he's very handsome too. Not that should matter.
Yeah, and your example of Capuano and Pressley is very interesting. But she's my congressperson. I live in her district. So when that election came up, I was actually torn, and I will confess I voted for Capuano because of the power of incumbency and the committees and all of that stuff. But I'm delighted with Pressley. I don't agree with her on every single thing. I'm pretty far left, but not nearly as my daughter, who Bernie isn't quite enough for her. But and people who know me are probably listening, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's important, and it got me to think. And
Great,
Marilyn. Thank you.
Appreciate
you for
the
the
call. Thanks so much. Go Revere High. Go Emerson College.
Here's some texters. I love this idea. Go David Hogg. Baby boomers are giving us so much time for them to step aside and let's determine our own future. We'll be the ones bearing the burden of reaping the fruits of the seeds sown today. Here's Pat from Sharon. Go David Hogg. I wanted Bernie over Hillary, Seth Moulton over Nancy Pelosi, Joe Kennedy over Markey. Schumer is way past his sell date. And here's another one. I'm an old school Bernie bro, now a mother of two. If you cannot speak to the pain of the working class and materially make their lives better, materially make their lives better, you have no place as a representative. And I think that's one of the problems that the Democrats, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, missed the pain of the working class.
One of the things the Republicans do right is on their committees, they have turnover so that it's not just the same old people on top of the committees. And look at talking about Seth Moulton. Remember, he had to rattle Nancy Pelosi's cage about her being the Speaker of the House in order to get some new blood in there. All right, let's go to Jeff in Andover. Jeff, thanks for calling into Boston Public Radio.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I really think we have to look in a different direction, and we should compile a list of House Democrats called the Dirty 30 and target them, solicit on social media and through all kinds of sources, have categories like the 5 most corrupt in terms of trading stock.
Yes.
The 5 most that got money from the gun lobby. And I just think it's much better to go after the worst Democrats and show that progressives have some power.
But, Jeff, what happens since we're watching all the Republicans line up behind Donald Trump, even the ones who were like totally against him and wanted to impeach him? And so while the Democrats are sort of fighting this out and the Republicans are in line this time, is that, if you think so, if this is a danger for Donald Trump to get elected again for a third term or the next Trump person?
I really think that the House is going to flip no matter what happens, but I think it would really be a good instruction for the American people to see that you can target corrupt, because they all think people in power are corrupt. Mm-hmm. So just give them the lesson that you can target them and get rid of them.
You know, Jeff, thank you for the call. And you bring up a really good point. The idea that you can trade stock as I mean, it is crazy. The other day when Trump said in the morning, it's a great time to buy stock, and then in the afternoon he did the flip on the tariffs. I mean, half the country, well, maybe not half the country, but thousands of people are
5% of the country were able to make money on it.
And how much of those people were people that were in Congress? I mean, the insider trading. I'll say one thing for Scott Brown. He didn't get far, but that was one of his big things when he ran against Martha Coakley. Do not trade stock. And Nancy Pelosi was against that, which I think is a very big blemish.
She's
on
also
her.
one of the wealthiest people in Congress as well.
Correct.
So, all right, we just have 2 minutes left, Jake. Thanks for calling us. You're in the car. Can you take us home on this one?
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
I basically just want to echo most of what everybody else has said. I feel like the Democratic Party, inside and out, is just totally wimpy and flaccid and uninspiring. I mean, they're the most weak and wimpy and like their strategy to try and win against Trump was to sway conservatives and Republicans to vote for Kamala Harris. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, whoever thought that up should, they should have to go find a new line of work, I think. But, I mean, I think that the stagnancy within the Democrats is kind of what brought us Trump, honestly. I mean, totally uninspiring platform, poor candidates, and the fact that they're so reticent or hesitant to try and shake up anything at all with this system that is not working for most people. Like the system that Democrats have presided over as well as Republicans, it just stinks to high heaven.
Jake,
and we need some people who have the courage.
We are up against the clock, but that was a great call. Thank you so much. Wimpy and flaccid.
There you go.
How about that?
That's their campaign slogan. All right. Thanks so much. After the noon news, we're going to check in with Massachusetts Public Safety Secretary Andrea Cabral. You, of course, are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. And of course, you can watch us streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Stay with us.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you
and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. Discover the incredible story of how a 14-year-old girl survived the Armenian genocide and embarked upon an odyssey that took her to the heights of Hollywood stardom. Don't miss POV, Aurora's Sunrise, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Marjorie Egan in for Jim Bradley. Ahead of the second hour of Boston Public Radio, former Massachusetts Public Safety Secretary Andrew Cabral and a federal judge holding the Trump administration in contempt over its defiance. The administration refuses to return a man wrongly deported to El Salvador.
And I'm Sue O'Connell, also in for Marjorie Egan. Then we'll talk all things higher ed, and there's a lot to talk about from Harvard and the others standing up to Trump, international students and DEI, and that demographic cliff that's coming. We're joined by the College Uncovered podcast team, GBH's Kirk Carapezza and Heckinger's John Marcus. All that and two more things next on the second hour of Boston Public Radio on 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. President Trump is blasting Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell for not cutting interest rates. NPR's Scott Horsley reports it's not the first time Trump has criticized him.
The European Central Bank lowered interest rates today, and President Trump would like the Federal Reserve to take similar action. Of course, political leaders in Europe have not launched a trade war, which threatens to raise prices for their citizens. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell warned in a speech this week that Trump's new tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation. That's discouraging the Fed from cutting interest rates any further. This is not the first time Trump has criticized the Fed for keeping borrowing costs elevated. He says Powell's termination, quote, cannot come fast enough. Powell has insisted he plans to serve out his term as Fed chairman, which runs through next spring. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The Trump administration is hoping to fast-track asylum cases in immigration court. As NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports, a new memo encourages judges to drop cases without a hearing.
The memo sent to employees of the Executive Office for Immigration Review laid out a directive to drop, quote, legally deficient asylum cases. That's the office that oversees immigration judges inside the Justice Department. The memo means that a judge could turn away an asylum application without holding a hearing. This is an effort to try to reduce the 4 million case backlog in immigration courts. 1.5 million cases are asylum requests. But immigration lawyers say the move could hurt asylum seekers who go through the legal system without a lawyer to help them. They say the process is already complicated. A hearing is an opportunity to help explain their case beyond what asylum seekers might know to write in the paper forms. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, Washington.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are sitting down with French President Emmanuel Macron and European diplomats in Paris today to try to get closer to a peace deal or ceasefire in Ukraine. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports a Ukrainian team is joining them this afternoon.
The Europeans and Americans remain far apart in their goals and expectations on how to bring the war to an end. Considering him a pariah, no Western European leader has spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin in years. But President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff has met with Putin 3 times recently as the U.S. pursues deals with the Kremlin. The Europeans remain skeptical, pointing out that Putin has not budged on his maximalist demands and continues to bomb Ukrainian cities nightly. The U.S. recently broke with its G7 allies and refused to condemn a Russian attack on the Ukrainian city of Sumy on Palm Sunday that killed more than 30 people. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
Wall Street's trading in mixed territory at this hour. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Women, Infant, and Children, or WIC program in Massachusetts has made it much easier for the program's 125,000 monthly users to get their food and supplies. Massachusetts Department of Public Health Commissioner Robbie Goldstein tells GBH News Massachusetts is the first in the nation to offer online ordering and have those items delivered to the door or available for pickup.
This is equity in action. This is making sure that resources, nutrition, healthy food is available to everyone, no matter where you live or what your transportation situation may be. We've already had, in just a couple of weeks, thousands of orders placed through the online portal, and we're trying to expand it as much as we can.
The Massachusetts WIC program is 50 years old this year. Well, remember last year's rodeo in North Attleboro where several bulls escaped and ran down Route 1? Well, the owners of that rodeo want to bring it back. The Sun Chronicle reports that representatives from the rodeo appeared before the town council members this week, asking to bring it back to North Attleboro on June 15th. No mention was made of a location, and council members referred the rodeo representatives to the town special council, which considers event applications. If you remember, 7 bulls escaped from the rodeo last year. 6 were rounded up about 4 hours later in an Attleboro neighborhood more than 2 miles away. Police and firefighters had to shut down a section of Route 1. The 7th bull was captured by a rodeo worker the next night. 53 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Auto Insurance protects the vehicles that work to keep small businesses moving forward, including protection while running errands and other tasks. At progressivecommercial.com.
I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim has the day off. Our media maven, Sue O'Connell from NBC 10 Boston, is here filling in for Jim. Hello
Thank
again,
you. Good day, good day.
We're having quite a fun time.
Yes, we are, as usual.
As usual. That's right. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be live at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with Live Music Friday, the band Twisted Pie. Plus, Dr. Catherine Gergen-Barnett is going to join us, and Sue O'Connell is going to be back. I want to point out that I made a mistake earlier. Governor Healy is not going to be with us on the 25th. She's had to reschedule. So we'll let you know exactly when she's going to be back if you want to come down to the library and see her in person. But right now, via Zoom, is former Suffolk County Sheriff and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us every week. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, how are you?
Well, I'm great, and I'm well, no, I'm not great. Nobody's
we're not
particularly great at this particular time. But
I was at a comedy show last night, and the feeling of like, oh, we're laughing, like we should laugh, and we have to find joy where we can. But oh boy, things are tough.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot to laugh about.
Yeah, not a whole lot. But this gives me a little bit of hope, although you're probably going to dash it like you always do, Jen. So maybe I'm wrong. But, James Bosberg, the Chief Justice of the District Court, United States District Court of District of Columbia, he said yesterday that probable cause exists to hold Trump administration officials in criminal contempt for violating his orders about halting the use of the Alien Enemies Act to get the Venezuelan alleged gang members, we're not even sure how many of them are gang members, and the man that we know was wrongly sent there, deported. So will something happen here? Will there be criminal contempt? Will someone be fined or put in prison?
Well, I think that there are members of the judiciary, short of the majority on the Supreme Court, who are fighting back and are standing on the judiciary's role as a check and a balance against the executive branch. And Bosberg is one of them. Of course he found probable cause. I would say there's proof almost beyond a reasonable doubt, even without a hearing. And this is this constitutional crisis, which, in my view, we're in, is being forced by the Trump administration. I said a couple of weeks ago on this show, they have no intention of complying with orders by judges that they don't like or don't agree with. And the judiciary really needs to grasp that and embrace it. There's no good faith here. There's, historically, the presumption of good faith when dealing with the Justice Department has been almost unquestioned, to the point where when, on the rare occasions when they weren't acting in good faith, it really was shocking to the American public, shocking to the court. shocking to the participants when they were found to not be acting in good faith. Now it's almost axiomatic. I mean, it's quite clear that they don't have any intention of complying with these orders, and they intend to force the issue in the courts, outside of the courts, and they're also going to force the issue of presidential immunity around this, because it's clear that the Pam Bondi is doing. The Justice Department is supposed to be independent to a great degree of the executive branch. She is clearly doing the bidding of the President of the United States, and the Justice Department's losing credibility by leaps and bounds every single day, because it is quite clear that the cases that they're bringing are the cases that of vengeance and retribution and retaliation that the Trump administration wants them to bring. This is really unprecedented is not a good
no, it's
word.
like unprecedented exponentially. Andrea, the thing that I wonder if there's an afterlife, and if the founders of the Constitution are gathering around saying, gee, we should have given the Supreme Court an army, right?
Well,
because what we've just been obeying court orders, and every time someone says to me, well, Joe Biden didn't, I went, Joe Biden might have disagreed with an order and then appealed the order or taken judicial action. No one is saying you have to agree with every ruling every court makes, but there is a process that we go through. That way we get to the end and everyone feels heard. And the Trump administration is not doing that. But they're not going to walk across the street and arrest him. They're not going to arrest anyone. So what can the courts do to enforce their rulings with the Trump administration?
You can't hold the people who come before you in contempt. And one of the things Bosbach's doing here...
The criminal contempt, right?
In criminal contempt, right. And you can be held until you comply. I mean, you think, Sue, this would resonate particularly with you. You think of any reporter that's ever been thrown in jail.
That's right.
For failing to disclose a source.
Yep. Susan Warnick sat there. Susan Warnick sat there in that courtroom.
She was a heroine for us all.
Because she didn't reveal a source because it was protected. She had the right to protect her unnamed source.
That was back when she was married to Bob Lobel.
To do that. Now, it would be just like Trump to pardon that person, right? Or commute that person's sentence. And so that's why when I say constitutional crisis, what I mean by that is the Trump administration wants to force this to a position where it is the power of the executive branch against the power of the judicial branch. And it's no small irony that SCOTUS will be put right in the middle of this.
Wait a minute. So this judge could hold someone in criminal contempt and jail them or fine them, and then Trump could step in and pardon the person.
Well, Trump can step in and pardon anyone who's been sentenced under the federal system.
Federal system, yes.
Right. So
and he's got immunity, and Trump has, as Andrea says,
we're doing it.
But this is a district court. This guy's a U.S. district court.
But it's a federal court.
It's a federal. Okay. All right. Okay. U.S. district court, federal court. Okay. All right.
So, but what I mean when I say forcing it to the clash between the judicial and the executive is SCOTUS. They're the ones. The majority in SCOTUS gave him this immunity to act with this impunity. Now they're going to have to make a decision as to whether or not the judges, who all sit below them and follow a series of rules and precepts that they're all bound by, are going to be rendered powerless because he is abusing the very power they gave him. That's what makes this just so off the wall horrible. But as a preliminary matter, judges have got to be able to enforce their orders, and that means holding people to account who fail to comply. Even if they can't put Trump in jail, there are people in the Department of Homeland Security, there are people in the Justice Department. Let me just give you a quick example. They fired the one Justice Department AUSA who came in and told the truth about Abrego, who's been deported. He stood before the court and upheld his duty to tell the truth. He said, our issues on this are just jurisdictional. It's just a question of whether or not we can force El Salvador to return him. There really is no question that we failed to abide by your order. And they fired him. Do you know how hard it is to fire a line AUSA? There are rules in place that are long-standing to make sure that AUSAs cannot be compromised or don't have to fear losing their job by doing what's right. It is very difficult to fire an AUSA.
Assistant U.S. Attorney, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, it has to be for serious cause. They fired an AUSA for telling the truth that Trump didn't like. That tells you how far they're willing to go to push this, to get judges to comply, to get law firms to comply, to get employees to comply. There's no bottom here.
Well, let's stick with the comply word and talk about the law firms, because this is something I think regular folks are having a hard time wrapping their mind around, because it's never happened before to this degree. There's certainly been pressure. I feel like I have to say all the time, yes, I know there has always been pressure. I know there's always been favors. I know there's always been some sort of punishment that people get. Nothing like this has ever happened in our recent history. No. There are law firms who had hired or had people who did work that Trump disagreed with, the Trump admission disagreed with between Trump's presidencies. And now he's targeting those law firms and asking them to do huge amounts of pro bono work for things he cares about. And like every other Trump deal, when he threatens them and they comply, he then changes the rule and the ask and asks for more, and has most of these law firms, except for a handful, cowering. I want to ask you, Andrew, if you were one of these, if it was your law firm, you were in charge, what would you be doing, and what would you be saying to these other law firms and about how they're complying and then getting their knuckles slapped again?
What's amazing about this is that there's just no way in my mind that they could have believed that signing these agreements would be the end of it. I don't know how, if you know.
Well, because Trump has always kept his word, and he has. Right. He's never committed fraud. This. He's never defamed anybody. He's just done what he's always kept his word, especially around legal issues.
And we've said this. We've been saying this for weeks, certainly on this show, and I'm sure many people are saying it elsewhere. If they had linked arms, if these law firms had gotten on the phone with each other, if they had linked arms and stood shoulder to shoulder and said, no, not one of us, none of us, come at us. We do this for a living. Come at us. And he would have backed down, or he would have fought them. But they certainly had the resources to fight this. The ones that have resisted him have promptly gone into court, and judges have forced Trump to stop trying to enforce these orders. So the Paul Weiss law firms of the world and the others that have complied, they're essentially getting what they've asked for with him. And now he's bragging quite openly on social media and elsewhere that they're going to be doing his bidding. So he has co-opted hundreds and hundreds of $1 million of resources, of private firm resources. Do you know how many indigent clients would love the pro bono resources of these big firms for causes that would advance the public good as well as the individual good? And he's now basically saying, you'll go where I tell you to go, and you'll represent who I tell you to represent, and you'll do it for free. And they look like fools. They look like idiots, and they've disgraced the profession. If I were in a law firm like this, I mean, there are people that have left, have resigned. Mm-hmm. If I didn't have the power to change it or to resist, I certainly would resign. But I certainly, if I were a partner and had the power, would be gathering the forces and the resources, calling these other firms and creating an army, if I could, of legal might to push back on this. I mean, where do they think this ultimately ends? And what is the message to their other clients about what they will and will not do if money and power is the bottom line? What if you at some point become less valuable to them as a client? What can they expect out of you? I mean, the boundaries of where this kind of capitulation go far beyond the considerable damage of simply capitulating to this incredibly catastrophic administration, an anti-democratic administration in terms of what it does to the profession and to the people it's supposed to serve. It's really unspeakable in many, many ways.
Well, you think about people that are living paycheck to paycheck, which is a lot of people who are really struggling, and how difficult to do anything to upset your boss would be in that kind of situation, unless you had union protection or something. But when we read the Paul Weiss law firm, the partners, I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll mention it again, $20 million a year. Now, and the first year associates, $220,000, and those first year associates could probably get jobs at other law firms for that kind of money. But if when you're making $20 million a year and you can't give up $5 million a year or maybe $8 million a year, it makes you look a little ridiculous.
I would have paused. What I would have done if I were in that position, my law firm, I have all that money, I would just shut it down.
Right.
Just shut it down.
Yeah, shut it down.
And I'll say, you know what? I'm going to pay these people out on my staff. I'm going to help them find jobs. And I will come back. I'm going to work on the other side, or I'm going to work to make sure this doesn't happen. And I'm going to shut it down. Because how much money do you need?
Exactly.
But here's the thing. They capitulated so that they could have access to an administration that lives in 4-year increments with a president who can't run again, at least not at the present time. And I would
caveat that, right? Asterisk that, right?
It's not going to be some constitutional amendment, that allows him to do it. But you will go down in history as one of the law firms that capitulated to someone for the purpose of power and access that you lost 3 years after you signed the agreement. Now a new administration comes in. Where do you think you're going to be with them? With the money and the power and the access? I mean, the short-sightedness of it is also kind of astounding.
And I know someone is listening right now and having a bit of a headache in the car. Yes, a lot of this has happened in the past, but it's a reason it was backroom deals, right? There's a reason that there were conversations and winks and nods, because it wasn't this widespread sort of corruption and hostage taking that's happening. So, I'm not a big status quo kind of person, but at the same time, there was a reality in the way that the wheels got greased with law firms and presidential offices and elected officials. But this is just out and out destruction and kidnapping, which appears to be the next slogan for the Trump administration.
And not happening in a vacuum. It's part of this. What you're seeing here in the legal realm is also happening administratively, is also happening in various secretariats and the departments and the agencies that fall under them. And it's happening globally with other countries. This bullying, this assertion of dictatorial rule and authoritarianism this is the way they want things to go, so that there is not another free and fair election, and that they stay in power. That's what this is about.
Okay, so we have talked a lot about someone who has stood up to Trump. And Maine Governor Janet Mills, she went toe-to-toe to him at that session where he called her out on having a trans athlete in high school sport. And she said, we'll see you in court. Now the Trump Justice Department has sued Maine over refusing to comply with the ban they want to enforce on trans athletes. So where are we going with this?
And can I also just jump on first, too? Because, Andrea, oftentimes, regularly, administrations use federal funds to encourage school systems and states to do things. We saw it on the trans issue around having bathrooms that were accessible for both genders or all genders, and the school system and the federal government would say, you want this money, you have to do this. So can you just put that in relief to what's happening now versus the regular business of using federal funds to make states and cities and towns and schools do things?
I think that's a good point.
Okay. So you're right.
In 3 minutes.
But well, the Justice Department has done that in the past. I would suggest that they do it fairly judiciously, because they historically have never wanted to seem like, the boot grinding, down standing on the neck of states and their ability to do things. They do it largely around consent decrees, things like that, where they're trying to enforce the constitutionality of something, right? They're usually doing it to uphold people's rights. In this case, this is the Justice Department suing Maine to take away people's rights.
Expanding rather than taking away. Yeah.
Right. Which puts, when they go into court on something like this, it puts them at odds with a huge amount of precedent in terms of the law and establishing people's rights. That doesn't mean that they're clearly willing to do that. So what the position that it puts judges in is whether or not judges are going to ignore all of this precedential law in order to sort of further the aims of the Trump administration. I suggest to you that depends on which judge is hearing which case when. But yes, they are going to, they're going to try to take this money away from the state of Maine on this, the way that they're taking money away from colleges and universities and destroying research funding, trying to do away with tax exempt status. What my suggestion is again, that the states link arms through their attorneys general, and they say this is a pattern of retaliatory behavior. These executive orders have nothing to do with the public good, with good public policy, with upholding people's rights. It has to do with vendettas and vengeance on the part of a single unitary executive, an authoritarian exercise of that is anti-democratic. I think the arguments have to be elevated to talking about the impact on democracy, the impact on public policy and the public good, because he's going to keep doing it. He's going to keep using the public money as though it were his own and deciding which children get an allowance and which children get punished.
You know, Nancy Gertner wrote a great piece talking about this. Federal Judge Nancy Gertner was on with us about how he's aiming at blue states, not red states, and that there may be a ability to sue in that regard, different treatment for different states.
Well, equal protection law usually applies to the individual, perhaps groups of individuals. It'll be interesting to see if you can make the assertion on the part of a state, but I think it is well worth pulling out every single stop to make every legitimate argument before the court. Make the record, regardless of which judge you're in front of, make the record and make it unassailable.
You know what I will say? One positive, if we make it through all this, is that I think that regular people, and I don't mean that in any snarky or disparaging way, but people who have lives that aren't riveted by this like ours are, understand now how the federal government works, understand what the difference is, understand the powers of the presidency, understand a whole bunch of things that they took for granted because we took them for granted. We just expected they would happen. So, cancer funding being cut via Harvard, which we're going to talk to in just a little bit, ALS funding, tuberculosis funding, which we still have to, investigate so we don't get it back. I mean, all of these things that we took for granted, and maybe we weren't thrilled the way some of our tax dollars were being spent, but now we understand that there's a president who thinks that it's his tax dollars and not our tax dollars.
Well, in the immortal words of Joni Mitchell, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
You don't know what you got till it's gone, my God.
Paved paradise.
Yeah.
Put up a parking lot. There you go. All right. We're going to leave it at that since that was so poetic.
Nice.
Thank you very much,
done.
Andrea Cabral.
Andrea, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. We are talking with Andrea Cabral, of course, the former Massachusetts Public Secretary, Safety Secretary. And coming up after a quick break, we're going to speak with GBH's Kirk Carapezza and John Marcus from the Hechinger Report on the fourth season launch of their GBH News podcast, College Undercovered. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Other major marathons usually play some type of hype music as winners cross the finish line, but Boston is unique. When winners cross the line, we ring this.
We are fortunate to attend lots of marathons. Never heard anything like it.
I'm Esteban Bustillos. We climb to the top of the Old South Church Tower and meet the bell ringer. Tomorrow on GBH's Morning Edition.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And M&M Skylights, offering the full range of Velux skylight products, installation, and maintenance services to customers from Boston to Portland and surrounding areas. More information at mmskylights.com. And the Newman School in the heart of Back Bay, dedicated to being a spirited community for local and global teachers and learners, now enrolling middle school day students and 5-day boarding high school students. newmanboston.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim has a day off. I'm here with NBC 10 Boston Sue O'Connell, our media maven. We don't know what Jim is doing. Hope it's something fun. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. Not there on Tuesday because they're cleaning up after the marathon. And our previous reports about the governor joining us on April 25th, she had to reschedule, so we'll keep you posted about when she is coming in. Okay, our next guests are supposed to be here to talk about a new season of the new podcast, and we will. But there's so much to talk about in higher ed right now, from Harvard and others standing up to Trump, international students in DEI, and the demographic cliff, which the podcast focus on. We're going to talk about, I hope, all of that. Joined now in Studio 3 by GBH Higher Ed reporter Kirk Carapezza and John Marcus, Higher Ed reporter from the Hechinger Report. They are just out with Season 4 of the GBH new podcast, College Uncovered. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you both for coming in, Kirk and John. Now, before we start, I understand you want to make fun of our new...
I just miss the old bumper music.
Yeah,
Fun
well.
GBH fact, you know who picked that old bumper music?
Who?
Edgar B. Herwick III.
Edgar B. Herwick
There it
III.
is. And I miss the deep cut. I like the Wilco song. Everyone's complaining about the Springsteen stuff, but the Wilco song was nice.
Well, you know what happened?
I
We
do.
had copyright
Jamie
problems.
just told me.
Copyright problems.
So if you
what
want to
we
make a
gotta do-
contribution.
We did not want to be deported, right? We did not want
Too
that
soon.
to happen.
That'd be funny if that's what Trump decided to deport you over.
Yeah, well, you never know. You never know. So let's start, as I said when I was introducing you, before we get to the podcast, which is fantastic, by the way.
Thanks.
And and there are some positive things in there. But before we get to that, let's talk about Harvard. That they're going to may have to dip into part of their endowment, but they can't always dip into it because it's earmarked for other things. What the mood is over there. The president now President Trump, I should say, he wants this because his Department of Homeland Security is doing it. Insists that Harvard has to turn over disciplinary records of their international students. I mean, what kind of state of affairs is Harvard in?
Yeah, I mean, Harvard, I think, as you guys have said again and again, it's important for these institutions to step up, right, to stand up to what might be illegal or unconstitutional demands. But I think it's also important for these schools to respond to what John and I often talked about on the podcast and the criticisms of higher ed, right? And do that collectively. There's declining public trust in higher ed, and it's that we have survey data to back it up. Gallup found that Americans broadly value college, but if they attend college, most are going within 25 miles of their home, and they believe that places like Harvard and Columbia and these schools that are under attack are too costly, too quote unquote woke. I mean, that's the messaging that Trump ran on, and that's a very powerful narrative. Trump and his team have really tapped into that feeling in this country about the value of higher ed, political leanings at these institutions. And Harvard, I think, is, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, it's a really easy target, right? They in some ways, they do this to themselves. 10 years ago, only 10% of Americans had no confidence in higher ed. Today, a third have no confidence at all. And that decline is attributed to things that we've talked about, pushing political agendas, not teaching relevant skills, and of course the cost.
So, John, the fascinating thing about this to me is it is so on brand in the whiplash world. A couple of years ago, I heard a number of people, a lot smarter than I am, talking about how if we took in the Harvard's endowment, and they took their endowment and they spent it on scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
And a good percentage of their enrollment was scholarships that were fully funded. A lot of their issues would be, just basically disappear because there would be a variety of people on campus. And then, the other challenge of the secrecy of the board of Harvard, which we've all covered a number of times. And now at the same time, I'm hearing from people who hadn't quite realized how far Harvard Medical School especially reaches into our everyday lives of those of us who access medical care on a regular basis. How's a regular person supposed to think about Harvard right now?
Well, as essential, as you point out, as essential as these universities and colleges are, to pick up on what Kirk was saying, they were really easy targets because we've been through a decade in which not only were people sort of there was a lot of pushback against the way the colleges and universities reacted to protests and things like that. We've also seen, we've had that concern about the return on investment is legitimate. success rates at colleges and universities are very low. Not at Harvard, but collectively, fewer than half of students at four-year universities graduate in 4 years. There's 44 million Americans who started college and never finished. That's more than the population of Canada, who are really angry about this process that they went through. Some of them quit school for their own purposes. In many other cases, they were failed by these institutions that did almost nothing to improve their success rates. And now I think there's a lot of soul searching, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Universities are recognizing why they were so vulnerable to this, and a lot of that was their own doing.
But you know something, though? You guys know better than I do, but my sense is that's not the Harvards and the Yales and the Princetons, the elite schools that people are so angry at. That's schools like the one that maybe Donald Trump ran in a legal way and got fined $25 million. Schools that say they're going to do something and they don't, and you spend an arm and a leg for an education maybe at a lesser four-year school that's not worth the money. So aren't they blaming the wrong people?
Everyone in higher education gets painted by the same broad brush, and that's too bad. But it isn't only the Trump universities or the for-profit colleges and universities. It's a lot of private, nonprofit institutions.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a lot of regional public universities and colleges, and it's a lot of community colleges whose success rates are very low and that haven't really managed to improve those.
We talk about this all the time on the podcast. Not to be those guys who are like, listen to our podcast, but listen to our podcast.
Absolutely.
But colleges, not just Harvard, all the schools. We try to not run away from Harvard, but cover most colleges, because in many ways Harvard's like the Vatican of higher ed, right? It's got more money, than the Vatican. It's got, you never hear from the Pope, or you don't get an audience with the Pope. We never hear from Dr. Garber, right? And what happens there matters a lot, and it's symbolic, right? But it's one college president told me what happens at Harvard is really important, but it's also irrelevant. So yeah, they can't spend the endowment money, but they have like a $1 trillion line of credit. So of course they can stand up and afford. No one else can afford to stand up and fight back.
They're borrowing money now. Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, right. I think they have like $500 billion or $1 trillion line of credit. They can afford to do this.
They can't also, you correct me if I'm wrong, they can't necessarily take the endowment and use it for the research funding.
It's a fund of funds. It's earmarked for all kinds of things. But colleges, and this is a central message to our reporting, I think colleges can do a lot more to make higher ed more affordable, more accessible to most Americans, and to support today's students, and eliminate the educational disparities that we have across race, across class, geography.
What can they do?
Make it more affordable, right? Most Americans go to college within 25 miles of their home.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we lose sight of that here in Boston because we have students coming to us from all over the world, right? That's not how most of higher ed works in higher ed. Most Americans go to college within 25 miles of their home, right? So when they see Harvard, it might as well be on another planet, right? The odds of getting it are what's the admissions rate now?
It's low single digits,
right?
It's like 7%.
Right. So I think that's that messaging. And Trump, we heard this and we reported on it in our last season, which focused on politics. He's really, he just keeps hammering this point every day, right? The administration does something else to attack higher ed.
To attack these particular selective institutions,
6 schools,
which enroll a tiny percentage of Americans, and really where most people see these as there's a lot of anger about the kind of level of pretentiousness of these institutions, but it doesn't really affect most Americans.
Don't people that go to Harvard always say, I went to school in Cambridge?
No, they go, I went in the Boston area.
I went in the Boston area because they don't want to say they went to Harvard. Is that it?
Famous John Updike line.
Okay.
When I went to college near Boston.
Near Boston. Yeah. But let me ask you something, though. Maybe the problem here is we have too many schools and there's too much of an emphasis on going to college instead of going to vocational schools, which you can't get into anymore either because their waiting lists are so huge. And instead of spending all that money to go to a lesser school that isn't going to wind you up in a great position, like if you came out of Princeton.
Yeah, there's a lot of survey data from employers that say it doesn't really matter where you go. It matters what you major in. And that's increasingly true, especially as the kinds of jobs that are available change so quickly. Mm-hmm. And so what you need is to be able to pivot and to be able to adapt. To your second point, yes, we do have too many colleges and universities. And if we have a chance to talk about this, which is a big focus of our podcast season, the numbers are working against us. And we're going to see a lot of those institutions, as we already have in Massachusetts, start to close.
Yeah, let's jump into
demographic.
Demographic, because I was on the board of my daughter's preschool back in 2003 through 2007, and we saw the demographic predictions of what the college years would be from, 2020 forward. And we were trying to plan, for the lack of kids that were going to be at the preschool basing, the 20-year plan that we did.
Is it still open?
It is still open because of my God. No, it's still open.
Your brilliant leadership.
Brilliant leadership.
That's right.
They're all laughing now. But the question is, as we are predicting at the actual bodies, as you are doing in this, the numbers of people who are available to go to school, how many schools there are, what the purpose of college is right now, and then we want to bring in also the foreign student issue.
Right.
What's this season about, and what's this demographic cliff?
So we should define our terms, because if you walk up to most people on the street and you say, what's the demographic cliff, they have no idea what you're talking about, right?
And
so,
they should, because it's going to affect everyone. It doesn't really only have to do with college.
Right, and it's going to, and this is the focus of the podcast, right? It's not just about the effect on colleges, but we start the season 18 years ago in 2008 with the Great Recession, and during economic downturns, people have fewer babies, right? So Americans stopped having kids, many Americans, for financial reasons, because it became too affordable. You guys talk about this all the time on your podcast, right? So we have out-migration here in Massachusetts. This is a national problem. So 2026 is when the demographic cliff hits. We're going to see a steep drop in the number of 18-year-olds. I think it's going to drop by about 15 percentage points. That follows a decade where we saw the percentage of Americans going to college drop by 15% for all the reasons we just talked about, right? So the pool of students is going to shrink, and colleges, it's already competitive now, competing for students. It's going to get a lot more competitive.
So does that mean the prices will drop for colleges?
They already have.
Yes.
If you look at tuition when adjusted for inflation, it's going down. When you look at the odds of getting in, it's going up. So
which is good for the kids.
Which is really good for students and their parents.
We have a whole episode on that.
But it's really bad for all the rest of us. And you don't have to care about colleges and universities. Especially here in Massachusetts, it's bad for all the rest of us because it has an economic impact. If fewer people are going in one end of the pipeline, then fewer people are coming out the other. And it's coinciding with a huge decline in the number of, or a huge increase in the number of baby boomer retirements. So essentially, when we all retire, there's fewer people paying into our Social Security.
That's why you can't retire.
That is the,
That's right.
That is the sort of self-interest that we should all be paying attention to here.
And just to put this in context, too, and locally, Mass Inc. did a study on this, and by 2030, there's going to be 200,000 fewer college-educated people in Massachusetts, and that's just as the percentage of jobs that require a college degree is going to hit about 70%.
In a state already hugely dependent on the knowledge economy and hugely dependent on people going to college.
And the reason they're going to need those college degrees is the tech skills?
Well, look at the industries that drive our economy: life sciences, healthcare. That's you need post-secondary credentials to work in those fields.
And we're not just talking about 4-year degrees. When we say post, that means anything, a certificate. So it's just something beyond high school.
I want to reintroduce you guys, Kirk Carapeza and John Marcus, and we're talking about education. The podcast name is College Uncovered. They've just started their fourth season. I was listening to the one where you were at the beginning of one of them where you were at the college fair.
Yeah, down in Jersey.
And they were all trying to compete with each other. And I thought, how weird is this? I mean, you hear about businesses coming to business schools in the summer to recruit kids for they're not the young people that are going to go work for them for the summer, those internships. But I never knew that there was this stiff competition for colleges. And tell us about...
Yeah, so 80% of colleges now admit more than half of the students who apply. This is before the demographic cliff, right? 8 out of 10 applicants to public schools and 7 out of 10 applicants to private colleges are now being admitted. That's an 8 percentage point increase over the last 10 years. So it's getting easier to get into college. So when I went to this college fair, this is one of those things where with audio it's kind of difficult to illustrate. We're talking about a graph or demographic trends. So we actually had a professor. Where was the professor from?
In the UK somewhere.
Yeah, in the UK. He puts it to sound. So we kind of have like a sonification of the demographic cliff and what it looks like. But we also wanted to hear what it looked like at a college fair. So we went and
we got the sound of it.
Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah, let's play the clip from this is the new season, as I said, from College Uncovered. And here's Kirk attending this college fair, speaking to a prospective student named Brody, who finds out he was born in the sweet spot, that demographic cliff for college admissions. Here it is.
Is it anxiety-inducing for you guys going through this process?
I would say yeah, definitely, and time-intensive.
Why is it so stressful?
So there's a lot of pressure on me. I have to decide in these next 2 years that I've got to go to a specific college.
But Brody may be in luck because in the college admissions game, he was born at the right time in 2008, just as birth rates in the U.S. started to decline.
And you also talked to someone who got letters in the mail accepting her to colleges that she
That's
hadn't
called
even
direct
applied
admissions,
to.
right? This is another federal
talk
report
about
on
those.
it.
My daughter actually graduated from Bunker Hill with a 4.0, and you would think that we were sitting on a mountain of money that any college would love to have her come. It's a direct admissions. It's crazy.
Right. So this what's so interesting seeing this from the outside looking in now is, I think we all remember what it was like to be 18 years old.
I don't
and
actually.
How stressful
it was the
you
70s.
don't. You blacked it out. That's good. That's good.
1979.
You're like Bill Lee. You just sprinkled the dope on your cereal. All right. So, but these 18-year-olds, it's so you can see how stressed they are because we've put so much on this. And when you listen to, Our Air or read the New York Times, you think that it's really hard to get into college. It's not hard to get into college. It's hard to get into a few colleges. They want us to think this. This is what they've sold us, right? So it was fun. It was a great assignment. I got to go and tell these kids it's easier to get into college and you were born at the right time. And so what we're finding is more schools are doing things like direct admissions. So imagine that, applying to college isn't a thing anymore, and colleges apply to you now. We're seeing more and more schools do this. Hundreds of schools do this now, including state systems.
Yep.
Oregon does this, Minnesota, Connecticut.
You're just in.
Yeah, you're in. We feature one student. She got 12 direct admissions offers.
So we've come sort of full circle. What you said is really important, that you didn't know this happened, that there were these recruiting fairs. And in fact, it's a buyer's market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is what we talk about on the podcast, is that colleges have kind of they have benefited from this mythology that it's impossible to get in. They have encouraged that. They've encouraged us to believe that. And that's among the reasons, to come back to what we started with, that people don't like colleges and universities. They perpetuate this myth. They make us think that we're lucky that they'll even just consider our application, when in fact we're in the driver's seat.
So I want to talk about international students because, as we said before, the Homeland Security now is going to go after the disciplinary records of international students. But tell us about what they mean to these colleges. I was stunned to hear that 27% of Ivy League schools are made up of international students. So is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? David D'Alessandro used to run Hancock Insurance, just wrote a big piece complaining about one of his smart kids, of friends, really smart kid, didn't get into her school she wanted to. He was like stunned, and he blamed it on too many international students. So what should we think about international students, John Marcus?
Yeah, they subsidize domestic students. That's what I think. That's the bottom line. Well, they pay full tuition. They very seldom qualify for institutional financial aid, although that's also changing because universities need them so badly. And Massachusetts has the fourth highest number among states, after California, Texas, and New York, of international students. Our institutions, Northeastern MBU in particular, a quarter or more of their enrollment is international. Much of that is in the graduate level. What's really happening kind of insidiously and without a lot of people noticing is that even before this Trump administration, this second Trump administration, the numbers have been going down. Mm-hmm. International education people will tell you it's going up. But when you look very closely, what they're not saying is that the number of new international students is going down, and the number of graduate international students, huge cash cow for universities, is going down. What's going to happen now when they begin to see videos of students being abducted off the streets and and when China is telling its students not to come here, when geopolitical tensions are getting worse, and with India, which is now the number one sitting nation, building 1 million of its own universities and colleges, they're not going to come here anymore. It's $4 billion a year in this state, just this state, and $40 billion nationally.
The point that folks also don't get is that international students in the U.S. are an export for the United States, and they count under our services category of exports, right? So if we suddenly make it inhospitable for students to come here from other countries and go to the colleges to underwrite the kids that are obviously going to get in, if they're going to get in somewhere, we're both going to take a hit on our export numbers.
I mean,
our
going to come now.
Right.
I mean, if I were a
we're
parent,
still the top. We're still the country. In upcoming episode, we talked to some Chinese families because they're the top. China is the top sender of students. We're still the top choice, but between the tariffs and this image that we're having an unwelcoming environment, we feature a mom who only wants me to use her first name for obvious reasons because she's got a son who's already here and she's got a daughter coming through the pipeline, and she doesn't want to send her daughter in more tuition dollars here because of what she's seeing and the visa issues. And it's not. Some people, I talked to someone yesterday for the podcast from the Heritage Foundation who took the David D'Alessandro line, saying like, you know what, maybe we should enroll fewer international students. That that narrative is powerful in wide swaths of the country, and I think higher ed does a really bad job of communicating its value. Here in Boston, we see it, I think, because we know it drives our economy. There's 60,000 international students here. But we also look at a rural town in Minnesota, Mankato, Minnesota, probably mispronouncing it, but they have 45,000 people, 2,000 international students who contribute $25 million to the small town, right? That's that story is really important. And it's not, hysteria. The Heritage Foundation expert told me, the colleges are intentionally going into a panic. They want everyone freaking out because this is so important to their business model. Yeah, that maybe, but there's a track record now. This is the second Trump administration. In the first administration, international enrollment dropped 12 percentage points.
And you know what that does? Like, even in my neighborhood, I live in Fort Hill, in Roxbury,
by the way.
right? And it's a number of Indian, Pakistani students, my entire neighborhood. The Christmas tree shop guy across the street made a ton of money from them because the ones that stayed over the holiday break wanted to celebrate Christmas.
Right, or I think of Williamstown, Massachusetts. It's got one of the best Indian restaurants in the state.
Well, they also stay and start businesses, more importantly, and there's more foreign-born people in Massachusetts that have graduate degrees than domestic-born.
Well, they've also, a lot of these people are the ones that start all these great companies. I mean, a lot of these foreign students have better education, K through 12, than we do, tragically.
I think nationally, what is it? It's $40 or $50 billion the economy
$40
each year.
billion.
$40 billion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there's no foreign students, Wellesley College would now cost $100,000, will cost $150,000. Is that what we're going to find out?
And this is the issue with the demographic cliff. This is the perfect storm that we're talking about, right? So if the number of 18-year-olds drops, right, next year,
the proportion of them going to college goes down.
Right, and international students go
Stop
elsewhere,
coming.
we're in trouble.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Well said, gentlemen.
Yeah, great podcast, by the way. I really enjoy it.
Kirk Carapezza and the Heckingers reports John Marcus. Of course, Season 4 of GBH News podcast, College Uncovered. Get it wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much. What a great conversation. Coming up after the break, two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
After federal agents came to two Los Angeles elementary schools, the Department of Homeland Security said it was checking on students who came unaccompanied to the U.S. The LA superintendent is not buying it.
We categorically refute the agency's statement that this was nothing more than a wellness check.
I'm Elsa Chang. That conversation on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, outlier author Malcolm Gladwell, and geopolitical economist Pippa Malmgren. BostonSpeakers.org. And Brook Meadow at Cobb Corner, an assisted living community offering wellness, care, and support services, including an on-site exercise physiologist to help seniors stay physically active. More at brookmeadowslr.com.
Okay, welcome back to Boston Public Radio. This is our Two More Things segment. Jim is not here today. He's got the day off. So Sue and I are going to take the mantle and we're going to do our Two More Things segment. I want to point out we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. So here's mine. You know, Canadians are so polite, Sue.
Yes, they are.
They're lovely people. But they've gotten a little ticked off lately because we're talking about them as the 51st state and we've raised these tariffs. And they're kind of upset. And there's a fear that they're not going to come and spend money in the United States anymore, which indeed a lot of them are not. So how about this as an idea for Cape Cod or maybe the coast of Maine or maybe Florida, all these places where Canadians used to spend all their money and they don't anymore? These huge red banners. Stick them on these light posts. Put them on the main road in the town. They show a huge Canadian flag shaped into a heart between the words, and this is out in Palm Springs, California, between the words Palm Springs and Canada, to say that Palm Springs loves Canada. You could do this all over the country. York, Maine loves Canada. Hyannis loves Canada. Because it turns out that a lot of Canadians were telling the Washington Post reporter that they're not going to go to these places anymore. And places like Palm Springs, millions and millions of dollars every year go into vacations in Palm Springs. This one guy said he sold his home in La Quinta in Palm Springs. That's right outside of Palm Springs. And he said he's never coming back, and he's been going to Palm Springs for years. So I think this is an opportunity for the people that are worried about the Canadians to show more love.
You think that's going to do it, Marjorie? Do you think they're going to be like, you know what? I'm going to come over the border. The banner is enough to welcome me.
I don't know. This is a guy I mentioned, Lakita. He sold his paintings, he sold his TVs, he sold his 2005 Ford Mustang convertible he was whipping around Palm Springs in. And he says he's going to, he's going to get his new vacation home? Mexico.
There you go. See? Mexico's gain.
Mexico's gain.
All right. Well, my one thing of the two things is just to call attention to a Supreme Court case that is looking to ban LGBTQ books in school. It's Mahmoud versus Taylor, and it's a Supreme Court case out of Montgomery County, Maryland. Do you know, they would send kids home with book bags, right? And select books, right? Happens all across the country. And often, in our state, I believe it's true, the parents would have the right to say, I am opting my child out of this lesson because it does not match our religious beliefs or our cultural beliefs or whatever it is. And this county, of course...
Where is this again?
This is in Maryland.
Okay.
The school
Maryland's
county... Yep.
kind of a blue state, isn't
Yep,
it?
but the school county decided to not let the parents opt out of the book bag stuff anymore.
Okay.
And so a number of religious groups, it's always nice when religions come together, a Muslim parent, Catholic parent, a Ukrainian Orthodox parents have all joined together to sue. And this is, again, going to be in front of the Supreme Court, saying that they want to be sure that LGBTQ books aren't used in lessons. Now, why am I highlighting this? Because sometimes we have conversations about why didn't ABC go ahead with the lawsuit against Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump sued them. They settled. ABC got a ton of criticism about that. And one of the reasons they didn't is because they didn't want it to go to the Supreme Court if they won, and have it appealed to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court would say, I'm going to come down in favor of Donald Trump and squelch and stomp on free speech for the news media. So this is an example of parents who banded together because the school group, I think wrongly, said they couldn't opt out of these LGBTQ books or any other books, and now it's going to the Supreme Court. So it's just one of those, like, we need to be thoughtful.
The religious parents want to be able to opt out.
Yes.
Okay.
But the way they're doing that is to ban LGBTQ. The suit is to ban books from
altogether.
Yeah, and this is why in this day and age we have to be so careful about the fights that we pick to fight, because if you end up in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, which is conservative and wants to lean towards Donald Trump and towards conservative ideals, you end up enshrining it into law. And that's what my concern is. But, however, if we wanted to have free speech, to have Canadian banners all across America, I would support that right now, Marjorie.
Okay. Well, again, Andrea Cabral always tells me I'm naive and a little Pollyanna. But I like to think that the Supreme Court, even except for Clarence Thomas and Alito, who I think are beyond saving, and maybe a couple more, are realizing what they've created.
Well, you would hope so, but then it takes the bravery to have to stand up to do it, which is the part that is what I'm afraid is missing. I mean, people become judges, even the ones you don't agree with, because they believe in the law, usually. Right? And you want to be a Supreme Court judge because you want to honor and uphold the Constitution based on how you interpret it, right?
Well, that is correct. I have hope for Amy Coney Barrett. I think, and I have hope for John Roberts. Even though the evidence is against me, I have hope that they may be appalled at what they've been seeing. But I don't know. I should make a programming announcement before we break that on we are going to have Wesleyan President Michael Roth on Tuesday's show. He's standing up to Trump. My Holyoke President Danielle Hawley on Thursday. She's also standing Trump. So we're going to lift up these people who are standing up to the president.
All right. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to go to class with MIT's John Gruber. He explains the U.S. trade war with China and whether those AI videos they're making of fat, sad Americans working in sweatshops may be our new reality. How's that for sunshine? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, and streaming, of course, at youtube.com/GBH News. Stay with us.
You can make a lasting impact on the station that has provided local news and conversation throughout the years by naming GBH in your estate plans. Be part of the legacy of public radio in New England. Learn more at wgbh.org/planning.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering teen and adult recreational cooking and baking workshops, series, and cooking couples classes for culinary enthusiasts. CambridgeCulinary.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Marjorie Egan, in for Marjorie Egan. Ahead on the third hour of Boston Public Radio, MIT economist John Gruber delves into Trump's trade war with China. Both countries keep ramping up the reciprocal taxes on goods. Are we headed straight for a recession? We hope not, but we'll ask the professor.
I'm Sue O'Connell in for Jim Browdy. Then it's Am I the A-hole? Who gets to control the music on car rides? One driver took to Reddit to complain about his two friends who he picked up for a very short carpool ride and who immediately complained about his elevator music taste. Does the driver always get to control the aux? Call or text next on the third hour of Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Florida State University is telling people to shelter in place as police respond to reports of an active shooter at the student union on the Tallahassee campus. Tallahassee Memorial Hospital says it's received several patients from the incident. Italian Prime Minister Meloni is meeting with President Trump at the White House this hour. Ahead of the meeting, Trump praised the U.S.-Italian bond.
We have a very good relationship together, and as countries, we have a very good relationship.
He also says he expects Italy to work out a trade deal with the U.S. NPR's Deepa Shivaram has more.
Meloni, head of the right-wing Brothers of Italy party, was the only leader to attend Trump's inauguration this year. But relations with Europe have been tense after Trump announced 20% tariffs on European imports, which he then reduced to 10% to allow for negotiations to take place. Meloni last visited Trump at his Florida home in January, and she's set to host Vice President J.D. Vance in Italy in the coming days. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News, the White House.
Two federal judges have temporarily blocked the Trump administration from withholding funds for climate and environmental projects. NPR's Michael Copley has more.
Courts are pushing back against the Trump administration's efforts to cut off billions in grant funding that Congress approved during the Biden administration. In Rhode Island, a judge said the funding freeze appears to be unlawful and told the government to restart payments to nonprofits while a lawsuit plays out. And in the District of Columbia, a judge temporarily blocked the Environmental Protection Agency from unlawfully suspending or terminating grant funding. The judges said the EPA hasn't provided evidence of wrongdoing by the grant recipients. The EPA said it's reviewing the ruling. Other agencies named in the Rhode Island case declined to comment or didn't respond to messages seeking comment. Michael Copley, NPR News.
Much of Puerto Rico is still without power after a blackout across the whole island. It's the second such blackout in nearly 4 months. NPR's Sergio Martinez Beltran reports more than half the utilities customers have had their power restored.
The blackout started at noon on Wednesday and left 1.4 million people in Puerto Rico without electricity. Slow progress has been made. Puerto Rico government officials say they expect 90% of the island to have power again by Friday or Saturday. It's not clear what caused the blackout. The last time the island was in total darkness was on New Year's Eve. Today, roads are chaotic. Gas stations have lines as people scramble to get fuel for generators and ice. Puerto Ricans are continuing to call for the government to cancel the contracts with the companies that oversee the generation and distribution of power. Sergio Martinez Beltran, NPR News, Carolina, Puerto Rico.
Wall Street's trading in mixed territory at this hour. The Dow is down 248 points. The Nasdaq up 41. The S&P 500 up 38. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Registry of Motor Vehicles seeing more people trying to get a real ID-compliant driver's license or ID card ahead of next month's deadline. The RMV now accepting walk-in appointments for people who need the real ID for imminent travel plans. Starting May 7th, standard licenses or ID cards that are not federal real ID compliant will no longer be accepted as IDs for domestic air travel or for entering federal buildings and nuclear power plants. People 18 and older without real IDs will need to present a passport along with their license or ID card, and compliant mass IDs feature a white star inside a yellow circle. It's in the top right corner of the card. Most of the 3.1 million Bay Staters who already have a real ID compliant ID got theirs after making an appointment in advance at either an RMV location or a branch of the AAA. Former President Joe Biden made his way to Cambridge yesterday, in part to celebrate Harvard's decision to defy demands from the Trump administration. Biden attended an invite-only event at the Institute of Politics. The Crimson reports the event was planned weeks in advance of the university's funding fiasco that it's going through this week. According to students who attended the seminar, Biden said that Harvard stepped up in a way that no one else has. In sports, Red Sox off today, back at friendly Fenway tomorrow for the start of a weekend series with the White Sox. We are at 56 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indiana University, establishing the IU Launch Accelerator for Biosciences to drive healthcare discoveries and train the next generation of innovators. More at go.iu.edu/IULab.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and NBC Boston Sue O'Connell, our media maven, is in for Jim Browdy, who has a day off. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. A lot of controversy about the music, really.
We love it.
Worst
we hate
thing,
it. We love
hate
it. It's
we love
the best.
it. We
it's
hate
the greatest.
it. Yeah, but
I just like a good bass line and a driving drum beat.
Driving drum beat. Okay. All right, we'll try for that. Anyway, we are going to talk about some money issues with John Gruber. John's chair of the MIT's Department of Economics, where he's also the former professor of economics, instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts Healthcare Reform Act and the Affordable Care Act. His latest book is Jump Starting America, How Breakthrough Science Can Revive Economic Growth and the American Dream. I'm so glad we're talking to you today, John. Thank you for joining us, because you're going to talk about the tariffs and China and what's going to happen and where we're going to end up. And are we going right down the tubes, or maybe we will come up from the tubes, or whatever? Tell us about us in China.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Look, my wife said to me today, you could talk about tariffs again? Haven't you talked about that a bunch of the show? And,
you know, John, I saw a comic last night, and he has a friend whose name is Tariff, and he said he doesn't know what all the hubbub is about. Like, everywhere he goes, they're like, Tariff!
But look, as crazy as we thought tariff policy would be, this is statistically 1,000 times crazier.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember Marjorie was on a few weeks ago in a neck brace. This is now a full body brace from the whipsaw of trying to follow what's going on.
John, can you do one thing for me first? Because I don't get to be on every day, so I always, when I get an opportunity to talk to you, it's exciting. Can you tell folks that tariff is sort of a neutral term, like a hammer? Like, it depends on how you use the tariff. It's not tariff is good if you agree or disagree, or what your thought. Tariff is a tool. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on how you use it, right?
You know, it's a great point, Sue. In economics, we talk about positive versus normative words. Positive words describe the way things are. Normative words describe the way things should be. Mm-hmm. Tariff is a positive word. It's the same as tax or tree. It's just a description of something. In this case, what a tariff is, it's a tax on a good that comes from abroad. It can be all goods that come abroad, goods that come from a specific country. But just like when you go to the store in Massachusetts and you pay a sales tax, you are paying, that's on all goods you buy in Massachusetts. A tariff is essentially a sales tax on goods that come in from other countries. There are certainly many, many credible economists who argue that the right tariff rate is not zero. There are many credible economists who argue the right tariff rate is zero, but there are many who argue it's not. So this is not going on and say Trump's doing tariffs, so he's wrong. That's not the point here. The point is that every economist who is being open and honest in their thinking says that you would never want to do tariffs the way Trump's doing them, which is, we discussed in the previous show, but just to review, the notion of tariff policy is to ideally perhaps promote a domestic industry by, say, making it harder to buy that good from another country, or as a geopolitical tool to try to get something from another country. So let's talk about, and in particular here, let's focus on China. Okay, the idea of a tariff here would be, A, we've lost a lot of manufacturing jobs to China through free trade. And B, we don't like China for various things they do, including some things they shouldn't be doing, like intellectual theft. And we want to punish them. So let's talk about what Trump is doing. And let's review what Trump is doing real quickly, is he's putting on very large tariffs. Once again, if you remember, it'd be funny if it wasn't depressing. His tariff rates are based on nothing but saying there should be bigger tariffs on countries that we buy more stuff from. So let's remember, there's Lesotho, which is a small area in South Africa, which is incredibly poor. They buy nothing from us because they have no money. We buy lots of stuff from them because they make cheap goods. Therefore, he's putting a big tariff on them.
And so to humanize that a little bit, I actually have a cleaning service that comes to my house and I pay them. They don't buy anything from me, right? So if I were to tax my cleaning service for selling me what I have because they don't buy anything from me because I don't have anything to sell them, that's basically the Trump quote, the Trump calculus.
That's basically the Trump calculus. Well put. So he puts on these random rates, but then he goes up one level further and starts moving them around and changing them and removing them depending on what people say. And it's just, we know the specifics, but just think of this as, I call it policy by petulance, but just think of this sort of a random series of setting tariff rates. So how does that help accomplish his goal, especially vis-a-vis China? And the answer is it doesn't. And no one with any credibility thinks it does. And there's two reasons. Let's talk about the first goal, which is to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. Well, actually, he's destroying manufacturing jobs. And why is he doing that? He's doing that for two reasons. First of all, businesses like certainty. When a business makes a decision to build a plant, which is ultimately create jobs to help run the plant, that's a long-term decision. You don't just pop it up overnight. You make a big investment for something you hope will pay off over many years. You can't do that if you have no idea where you can sell your goods, no idea what your inputs are going to cost. Okay, businesses don't like uncertainty. They will invest less. If they invest less, there'll be fewer places to employ people. Will not create manufacturing jobs, will destroy them. The second point, and this is made so brilliantly, Paul Krugman pointed out from someone else's tweet. The second point, which is so important, is that he's taxing, in some case, the inputs to our manufacturing more than the outputs we're competing with. So the tweet that pointed this out, notice that if you go buy a laptop after the latest sort of loophole he put in, if you buy a laptop that's made in China, there's a 20% tariff. If you're a U.S. manufacturer making laptops, but you want to buy a battery that's made in China so you can make your laptop, there's a 145% tariff. So is that going to promote manufacturing? No, it's going to mean, well, we can't make stuff in the U.S. Let's buy the laptop from China. So basically, he is not doing anything to promote manufacturing, which comes to the second question of, is he achieving some geopolitical goal? And, his administration likes to talk about isolating China. Well, there's no isolation going on here because there's no coordination with anyone else. We're in a big world. And while America's the most important country, there's lots of other countries that up to be more important than us when you put them together.
John, may I just interject something here? Because this story so upset me, because I'm always rooting for my hometown, which is Fall River, and they've had their struggles. There's a great piece in the Globe today by Omar Muhammad who's talking about this company, Matuk. And Matuk is like some of the snazziest linens and towels around. And they make all these products in America. But this reporter talked to the guy that runs the place, and he said, but the linen that they use to make these products comes from Egypt. And they talk about how they don't make this stuff here. So the guy that runs the place is beside himself because they make so much money. They have an outlet down there. They make so much money. It's very snazzy. You know, Bloomingdale's has these towels and fancy hotels have these towels, and they employ all these people. And he said, we're going to be screwed by this because we can't get the products in America, and we can't just come up with them to make these towels. And he goes on to quote other people from in New Bedford, this other place, this Blount Fine Foods, sells to restaurants. The stuff they get comes from Guatemala and Mexico, and they go on and on and on, India. So it's putting thousands of people possibly out of work in New Bedford and Fall River, which really can't afford any more people out of work.
Look, I mean, we've seen it's a great example, Marjorie, and examples matter. Okay, we need to highlight these examples because examples resonate with people. But it highlights the fact that Trump has got this several hundred-year-old view of how economies work, which is sort of you make a good and you see the one guy makes it or he doesn't. It doesn't work that way anymore. We have an incredibly integrated global economy where much of what any company uses, much of what any manufacturing company would do involves inputs from many parts of the world. And ultimately, if you want to promote U.S. manufacturing, okay, you need to make them be able to afford the inputs that allows them to manufacture the good.
Yeah.
So, Joe,
and so he's not doing that.
One of the things that the Trump administration has been putting forward is that we're all going to be back in the factories making little phones. There was an AI photo that we're going to put up on the live stream that showed a version of Americans sitting at the little table working on the little phones. That, of course, isn't really accurate, but is accurate in what the vision of what they think we're going to be doing for work is. And at the same time, I'm fascinated by the viewpoint of how much pain certain nations' people can absorb, right? And if you compare the people of China versus the people of the United States of America, and the pain that Chinese people have absorbed for their government because they had no choice, let's be honest about it, but the one-child rule, the eminent domain that happened for them to, the government to take people's property in order to host the Olympics, the extreme COVID lockdowns that they had during COVID. It seems to me that if we were going to get in a war with a trade war with China, and there was going to be pain inflicted upon the populations, the Chinese people would be able to manage that pain more than we would, and we're not going to be going to factories to go working if that's the way it's going to go.
You know, you make two different points, which are both good. One is we're not going to be in the factories making the iPhones because we can't afford the batteries that go in the iPhones because we've got 145% tariff. So that's not going to happen. There's no coherent strategy to make that happen. The second point with no coherent strategy relates to your second point, which is don't pick a fight you can't win. And we're picking a fight with China, which is a country where, first of all, our livelihood depends on the stuff they send us. So we're picking a fight with someone where we're going to start being unhappy that we can't get their things. And as you said, we're picking a fight with a much more disciplined country. And we're also picking that fight by ourselves. We're not picking that fight in a coordinated way. China, for example, a lot of companies move their production out of China to other countries.
Vietnam,
because
Cambodia.
They're worried about U.S. opposition, like Vietnam. Okay,
a lot of furniture factories, right? Of all the furniture that we buy, that we put together.
Yep, absolutely. And take a place like Vietnam, which is very poor, benefited enormously from the manufacturing that got sent from China to Vietnam. Well, now we've hit Vietnam with a higher tariff than China on many things. So that's just going to move the stuff back to China. There's, once again, no coherent strategy on either the goal of creating manufacturing jobs or on the goal of geopolitical superiority.
Okay, you talk in your memo about innovation and biotech, which is a lot about innovation in Cambridge. And tell us about that, the long view about what he's doing vis-a-vis innovation.
Yeah, so look, in the short term, our retirement accounts are down and we're going to lose our jobs. In the long term...
Oh, that's good. Okay.
In the long term, remember, as I've discussed before on this show, what matters is how fast we grow as a nation. That's what's made us great, is we've grown so fast. And what drives economic growth is innovation. Now, the interesting about innovation is when you innovate and create new products, it obviously benefits the world. People use iPhones all over the world. People use pharmaceuticals all over the world. But it's surprisingly local. Innovation has surprisingly local benefits. The places that innovate really capture a very large share of the benefits of innovating. I mean, there's nowhere to see this better than Kendall Square. Okay, remember, Kendall Square in the 1970s was a dump.
Yep.
Literally, the city of Boston used Kendall Square as a snow dump for the extra snow that was in Boston. Okay, but then because MIT had an outstanding biotechnology department, people started setting up their businesses in Kendall Square, and now it's got first or second most expensive real estate in America, and it's created hundreds of thousands of jobs in this area. Now, what we've created in Kendall Square has benefited the whole world, but a lot of the benefit has gone to people here. So there's lots of examples of this.
Your book, by the way, talked about if we did things differently that in these places that weren't doing so well, that could make a huge difference. But plug the book, John.
Plug the book. So the book's Jumpstarting America with Nobel Prize winning author Simon Johnson. And we talk in that book about how local the benefits of innovation are.
Yes.
That you innovate, you create jobs and growth, but really a lot of it really is local. That's why in the book we argue we need to be spreading innovation around the country. But the point is there are example after example. Here's another great example. Think about generations of cell phones. Okay, 2G was based on the initial sort of cell phones, was invented in Finland of all places because they had public innovation. They had research funds to invent it. They grew rapidly. Whereas U.S. technology telecommunication companies like Lucent, remember Lucent?
Yes.
It disappeared. Okay, then comes 3G. 3G gets invented in Japan. Suddenly Finland's losing all the jobs and Japan's getting jobs. Then comes 4G. 4G comes from the US and Japan suffers. It is back to where it was before. Where the innovation happens, the jobs are made. The estimates are that the US leading in 4G innovation created $125 billion a year of US economic growth. So what matters is where the innovation is housed. And why is that relevant? Because what drives innovation is the talent and the funding. Okay, the talent, much of it comes from abroad. Okay, most of the most successful innovators that have created things that have made Americans rich came to America as immigrants or their parents did. So that's going to drop. Okay, it comes from a successful environment in which you're promoted to innovate. Well, what does that mean? That means an environment where you're not afraid of being deported. And that means an environment where there's funding for your research, which now this comes to the battle with Harvard and the general battle that he's going to have with universities in general, which is basically that what my book with Simon Johnson shows is that the key driver of innovation is public funding of science.
Yeah.
And that public funding often goes through universities. Trump has said he's going to cut $2 billion of funding to Harvard. If you saw the article in the Globe the other day, one example of what that cuts is a woman running a lab discovered cures for tuberculosis.
Yes.
I mean, it makes no sense. Tuberculosis is awful. It's rising again after we thought we got rid of it. It's rising again all over the world. We need to cure this. And not only is it good for the world to cure tuberculosis, but the place where the lab is that invents that better thing gets the jobs. So basically, it really is so critical. That's in America. It's critical for Boston. It's in Boston. And that's why these funding cuts and threatened funding cuts are detrimental not just to these institutions, but to the local and national economies.
John Gruber, some people have said to me, listen, certainly Trump these tariffs are on and off. They don't make any sense. We don't grow our own coffee except in Hawaii. So it's not like we're going to replace coffee if we're taxing Colombia so much with the tariffs. Yeah,
linen.
I mean, it's just not going to happen. So therefore, you have to take these tariffs as threats, as negotiations, as ways to get things that Trump believes are good for America and good for the economy. And we just have to ride out a little bit of this pain until it sets. Of course, the argument against that is businesses and investors hate nothing more than uncertainty and nothing more than chaos. And I know I own a small newspaper. I get my newsprint, still printed in a newspaper, from Canada, right? And so I don't know how much newsprint is going to be over the next 8 months. So if I want to hire people, I'm not going to do it now because I don't know if I'm going to have to pay extra for newsprint. Is there anything about this that makes sense? Just one tiny little thing that is a point here that Trump's tariffs or tariff threats actually could make sense in some universe?
Yeah, I was told by someone who's knows someone who believes in conspiracy theories that their answer is always, well, "You'll see, it'll be okay, you'll see."
Yeah, that's the only quote I ever use of Trump's. I say, "We'll see."
Look,
we'll see.
The bottom line is, literally, Sue, there is no element of how he's handling this that is smart policymaking. Once again, tariffs are not a normative term. Tariffs applied appropriately, many people think could be a good part of U.S. economic growth policy. But the way he's doing it, both what he's hitting, the randomness, the petulance, none of this makes any sense. It literally, and people say, well, I trust him, it'll be okay. Well, then he needs to tell us what's his strategy by which this makes sense. Yeah, all he said is just trust me. He's never said, here is why what I'm doing is going to help.
Yeah, I'm hoping that that before everybody loses their jobs and their 401ks disappear, that some Republicans will stand up against him. I heard Kennedy from Louisiana, a big conservative guy, saying, Harvard guy, by the way, saying
a lot of them are Harvard guys.
I have no idea what the strategy is, but I wanted to ask you something about MIT. We've talked a lot about. We were talking with our listeners earlier, and with the guys that do the what's the podcast called, the Uncovered Education or Education Uncovered. I should get the name of it so I can. Thank you. College Uncovered. I goofed that up. Sorry about that. College Uncovered, a great podcast about, obviously, college. International students. MIT's got tons of international students. And I just wonder what you hear from students or your colleagues about the atmosphere over there. Are people afraid? And if international students stop coming to MIT, that's not going to be good for MIT or good for innovation? I mean, what's the mood?
Well, I mean, it's both personal and economic. I mean, let's start with the economic part, which is, once again, ending on what you said, which is, if these students don't come to America, they're going to invent the amazing things they're inventing in other countries, and those countries will get those jobs and that benefit. But let's focus on really what's more important, which is the personal, which is people are terrified. Let's be clear what's happening. There are 9 students at MIT where MIT found out, without them being told, that their visas have been revoked. So MIT is very carefully making sure to go through a database that's available every day to see whose visas being revoked. There are 9 people whose visas were revoked, and if MIT hadn't told them, they wouldn't have known. Okay, that's unbelievably scary. First of all, their visas shouldn't have been revoked. I mean, that's a separate issue. I can't adjudicate the actual cases, but certainly it's unambiguous that it's scary that you could just wake up one morning and someone could come to you and you'd have no idea to say, by the way, you have to leave your visas, but it was revoked 2 weeks ago, and you had no idea.
Especially since, from what I've read, in some cases it's for being involved in pro-Palestinian, not pro-Hamas, but just pro-Palestinian demonstrations. And in some cases, we don't know the reasons. The people whose visas were revoked don't know the reasons either.
And there's a process. If your visa is revoked for any circumstances, you're supposed to get notice. Yeah. You're supposed to have adjudication. You're supposed to have due process. You're supposed to be able to present your side of it. You don't just get snatched up off the street and deported. There's a process
or sent to
anything.
Louisiana.
There's an adjudication process.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, look, we're all upset about this, and we could go on for hours about the outrage. I think the more interesting question for you all is, how do you get people to pay attention and realize it's coming for them, and not people who listen to the show, but just generally, Americans need to understand the consequences for the prices they pay, for the livelihoods they leave, for the friends they have. And we need to make this real for people so that they really understand the enormous economic and human consequences of these actions.
Okay. Right. Well, we'll do our little part here, John, what we can. But thank you once again for explaining all that. Great to talk to you, John. And the book, again, is Jumpstarting America. Finish it. Jumpstarting America.
Jumpstarting. I have to read it. Jumpstarting America: How Breakthrough Science Can Revive Economic Growth and the American Dream.
Yeah,
there you go.
And the thesis about going to places that doesn't have this kind of Kendall Square thing, and how it could change whole big swaths of the country that are suffering, is a great one. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Good to
Thanks.
see ya.
Okay.
John Gruber, of course, Ford Professor of Economics and Chair of MIT's Department of Economics. And, of course, as you know, instrumental in creating both the Massachusetts Healthcare Reform and the Affordable Care Act. Coming up after a quick break, look, the only reason why Marjorie never takes a Thursday off is because it's her favorite
right.
Am I the A-hole day. Okay, here it is. A group of friends cannot agree on what music to listen to when they're in the car together. So, does the driver get the final say, or is he being an a-hole for forcing his friends to listen to his weird Brazilian elevator music? We're asking you to weigh in next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
After federal agents came to 2 Los Angeles elementary schools, the Department of Homeland Security said it was checking on students who came unaccompanied to the U.S. The LA superintendent is not buying it.
We categorically refute the agency's statement that this was nothing more than a wellness check.
I'm Elsa Chang. That conversation on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have any unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, hour number 3. Jim Browdy has a day off. I am here. Marjorie Egan, that's who I am. I'm here with Sue O'Connell from NBC 10 Boston. Hello, Sue O'Connell.
Hi, Marjorie. Marjorie, before we, can I hijack for a second?
Sure.
We got a couple of questions about John Gruber that I think you and I can answer from the texts. So someone is texting saying, Harvard is so concerned about disease research funding. Why don't they dip into their $50 billion of free donated endowment money? Robert and Walpole. We talked about this with the guys earlier, too. That endowment money can't easily be transferred from one thing to another.
Right.
So they just can't take the endowment money and say we're going to give it to research, and that's why they're borrowing so much money. So, it's not just about how much money they have, it's how much money they're going to have for the future and how they're trying to plan for this. So
yeah,
it's a very, I don't want to be alarmist, but at the same time, Harvard is not like other colleges, but Boston Children's Hospital, Mass General, Dana-Farber,
yeah,
Brigham and Women's, working on, tuberculosis cures, working on ALS cures, all those things funded by the federal government, which I think we would agree would be a good thing to do. It's not just Harvard money.
Well, when you hear people talk about the best hospitals in the United States of America, what's the one that often comes up? Mass General.
Now
it's Mass General
Man's
Brigham.
Greatest Hospital is what they call it, MGH.
And so they're going to get hit. Larry Summers, who used to be the president of Harvard, who's a little bit more of an outspoken guy than the present guy, Alan Garber, has said that in an emergency situation, which I think you could call this, they might be able to do a little wiggling around with the endowment and get some money out of that, but it's not as easy. It's just going in and writing a check from the endowment, that's for sure.
Okay, so I hijacked that just because,
you did.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay.
I wanted to be like Jim and interrupt you at least once.
It's okay. It's no problem. Anyway, okay, it is my favorite time of the week. I love this because it's sort of doesn't matter and it's fun and it's not depressing. The Am I the A-hole segment. This week's ethical dilemma, scraped from the bottom of the Reddit barrel, pertains to music taste, and specifically, who gets to control the audio when you are on a drive with your friends, especially when they like totally different kinds of music than you do. So here's a scenario. One guy kindly offers to drive his carless buddies to an event happening near his workplace. As they're leaving, the driver puts on some music from his phone, specifically this. Okay. The people in it's elevator music is what they call it, and the friends really don't like this. I mean, who really would? But anyway, this person that's driving with the elevator music takes the other friends, gets in the other friends' cars lots of times, and they play music that this person can't stand. In particular, they don't like hardcore rap. So the passenger in this car who's complaining about the elevator music is often the driver of a car insisting on the hardcore rap. So let's hear a little bit of the harsh. Okay, so some people love that and some people can't stand it. So the issue basically here is who's the jerk? Is it the driver for forcing their weird music on everyone else? Should the driver who's driving get to choose what they hear in the car? Or is it the friends for not wanting the entire drive to feel like they're trapped in an elevator to hell? And I should point out that the driver who is playing the elevator music and having to put up with the friend that likes the hardcore rap and the other passenger kind of took things into their own hands, unplugs the elevator music phone and tries to put on the radio. And the driver with the elevator music isn't pleased. So what do you think, Sue?
I have a lot of questions here, Marjorie. Where are they driving to? How long does this take?
5 minutes.
It's
5
5
minutes. 5 minutes.
How old are these people that they're having a fight over music? Why can't they talk to each other while they're in the car for 5 minutes? And have they ever heard of earbuds? I mean, oftentimes when you have a number of people in the car and you're going for a long trip, people do different things in the car and listen to different things. Why are they forcing this shared experience for 5 minutes?
Well, you could say in that case that everybody is the a-hole.
I think
because
so.
Why don't they just turn the music off? But I think a lot of people do this. If they're driving the car, especially if they're doing you a favor, and they have particular music that they like to listen to in their car, they figure, I'm driving my car, my gas, my favor. I'm going to play the music I like. And when you drive me, you can play the music you like.
877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. It does remind me of high school where my dear friend Tracy, when me and Lenore and Renee would get off of Russo's Bakery Revere on Broadway Revere after we finished our shifts, and we'd get in my Datsun B210 hatchback. And Tracy liked the kind of alternative music, like the late 70s kind of punk rock that was coming out. We loved disco, and Tracy would not get in the car unless we played her music.
Okay, then I would say
my car. Okay, but and she would get in, and she would always say, "Listen, I go to clubs with you guys. We go to high school dances. I tolerate your disco music all the time when I'm in the car and we're driving around Broadway Revere and Revere Beach Parkway and Revere Beach. I want to listen to Billy Idol. Is that too much to ask?"
So so did you follow your own suggestion
we did.
Turn off the radio?
No,
and have
we were in high school.
So whose music prevailed then? The driver or the passenger?
The passengers did.
Okay, well, so far, the passenger's losing in our text messages. The driver is the only one who has a say on what music is played. If not, the others can walk. The car passenger who doesn't like the driver's music could wear headphones with their own music. And Bruce from Cambridge says, I argue with my partner all the time about this. They don't agree, but I feel the driver always should be the picker of the music.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm looking for anybody that thinks it should be the passenger. But you allowed the passenger to push you around there, Sue.
Well, we did, but it was high school, to my point.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take a phone call. Gavin from Framingham. Hey, Gavin, welcome to Boston Public Radio. Who is the a-hole here?
Well, hi, guys. First time, long time.
Thank you.
It's clearly the passengers. I have a theory. It's okay to like bad music.
Yeah.
Yup.
Sort of some smooth bossa nova. I wouldn't objectively call that bad music. That said, I feel like when you're behind the wheel of your own automobile, you should be able to pick a selection that's going to help you get from A to B. If I had to listen to super aggressive gangster rap music, I think I'd be white-knuckling it the whole time, even on a 5-minute ride. Now, something as cool and smooth as that bossa nova is going to give us just a real smooth, relaxed, drive, and that's really where it's at.
There's also the idea of finding neutral music, right? Like something.
What's neutral?
Well, it's something that you don't love, but you don't hate, and no one has, heavy, big feelings about it. Or you could listen to some of our texters are saying to public radio and NPR, and
that's right.
Just get
you
rid
could
of.
Turn
then
us on.
You could have arguments about it, but something that you both agree you don't hate, but it's okay to listen to.
Oh, let's okay.
Hold
Here we
on,
go.
Gavin. Let's see how you feel
We've
about
got the
this.
great neutral music. Here it is.
All right, go ahead. Okay, I think I would go by a few exits on this. Is this some more of our BPR theme music?
Is this Anthem for the People thing? Okay. In case you want to know, this is the new BPR Billboard theme song, Anthem for the People. I think it's far preferable to the elevator bossa nova music.
I don't
what do you
know.
think?
What do you think, Gavin?
What do you think?
I'm actually anti-neutral music.
You are? Okay.
I think it's all about the driver. If you want to get a ride from a buddy, you're taking someone else's services. You got to deal with what they got.
All right, Gavin. Good call. Thanks for calling in. We appreciate it.
I kind of like Anthem for the People.
You like that?
I can do a little white girl overbite dancing over here. You know what I mean? Okay, 877-301-897 is the number. So far, again, in the text, I think the driver is absolutely winning this conversation. But what do you think, Margot, in New Hampshire?
Hi there.
Hi.
How are you guys? So I think there's a option that no one's talking about, which is, why do you have to have music on? Like, you got a group of friends in the car. Why not chat and catch up and discuss things, or, maybe put talk radio on. But honestly, if there really, really, really has to be music, then I do think it's the driver's choice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I always like it, Margo, when you're at like a red light somewhere and you look over at a car and the music is like really loud. And they're adults. They're grown adults. They're not kids or young people. And the music is really loud, and there's like 4 adults just sitting there in the car at the red light. And I'm like, wow, I can't even imagine being in that headspace where like my friends and I would just get in the car and do that as a grown up.
Yeah, I know.
I'm kind of jealous. I'm kind of jealous.
Somebody's like 17 or something. You
Yeah,
sort of expect it. They got the windows down. They got those big, huge speakers in the car. You can hear them a block and a half away. Yeah, but it is odd if they're like 35 or 40. Woody, the UPS driver, says the driver is always in charge of the music unless my wife is in the car, and then she chooses. Woody is probably a very happily married man because he lets the wife choose.
Yeah, my kid is in charge of all the music in our car, but luckily I get to hear my music because I think I indoctrinated her as an infant into Stevie Wonder and Donna Summer and Aretha Franklin. So I'm always pleasantly surprised when one of those pops up.
That's
in her
when
mix.
you have fights. Is when you're driving the kids around, and the kids are like 14, 15, they can't drive yet, or 16, and it's a fight about, are we going to listen to their music, or are we going to listen to mom or dad's music? What did you do about that?
What?
Did you have a little dispute, even though you indoctrinated
I'm fine.
your daughter?
I honestly don't care. And my parents, when I was a kid, in their Oldsmobile, I'm just going to relive all of the cars we owned. We had the 8-track tapes, and my parents would put the speakers on in the back seat, and then they would just sit in the front and talk, and I had my music on in the back. So there you go.
Here's a text from Jamie.
Our
As
producer.
a parent of a 5-year-old, I wish I was in charge of the music once in a while. Right now, it's all Bluey and Minecraft music. I'm losing my mind. And that is so true. When I babysit for my granddaughter, it's like, the Wheels on the Bus, which has been around forever. That was around when my kids were little. And of course, the baby shark thing, the mommy shark thing, the daddy shark thing, and that can drive you absolutely insane. But the kids love it, don't they?
We just want to make the kids happy and have driving safe, of course.
Driving safe, of course.
DA from Billerica says, people don't care about the music. They are fearing for their lives with my driving. LOL. So there you go. I can understand that. And Dan is texting about our new BPR music. Is he hoping it's the Brazilian elevator music? I hope it be. What it can be. What do the GBH lawyers say? They say more bossa nova.
More bossa nova. Okay, can we play the Brazilian elevator music again one more time by composer Herton Salvanini?
Get the girl from Ipanema kind of vibes.
I don't know. This would.
I could listen to this all day.
You could?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I couldn't take it. Okay.
I feel like like I'd be in the car thinking I have a TV show and it's my like Mannix and it's my theme show from the song from the 1970s.
Yeah, 1974 from Hareton Salvanini. Okay, let's go to William from West Boylston. Hi, William.
Hello there.
How are you doing?
Hi. Can you?
Yes.
Hey,
Yes.
I'm great. Hey,
Good.
I've been listening to you folks since your AM days, and I appreciate almost every day.
Oh, thank you very much.
My opinion is, hey, you bet, man. So, what I feel is, I did Uber last year for a while, and I believe that the customer is always right. So you ask them, do you want to hear music or the radio or news or whatever? You don't push upon them what you like. Now, I like a lot of stuff that people don't like. So you want a good tip, you want to please your customer, and get a reference. So, I mean, the way it looks like, you don't push your music on
Okay,
anybody.
what's your music, William?
Jazz, classical, hard metal, progressive rock, reggae.
You got a lot.
Got a lot. I take a lot of Ubers, and my Uber drivers almost universally. I was talking to one yesterday and asked if there's sort of an Uber suggestion, because sometimes it is really non-offensive sort of 70s music or R&B music. It's one of usually the Sirius satellite stations they're listening to. But the guy picked me up yesterday. And he had no music on, and we had about a 20-minute drive. And I said, hey, you can put on whatever you want if you want. And it was like I had given him a huge $5,000 bonus. He went, really? I can? I said, yeah, for the next 20 minutes, knock yourself out. And then he put on like basically non-offensive, basically vanilla R&B music. But I was happy for him, and I think I got 5 stars, William. So there you go.
Well,
hey, that's great. All right.
William, thank you for the kind words. We very much appreciate it. Lots of people are saying earbuds or headphones.
Yeah. It's a 5-minute ride. I think I'm going to they're all a-holes in this, Marjorie. I mean, why can't you just be quiet for 5 minutes and look out the window or talk to each other?
That's a good point.
It's 5 minutes.
We get these things off Reddit, right? and you would think, I mean, a lot of them have to do with mother-in-laws. People don't like their mother-in-laws in general. But this seems like going to all this trouble to write something to Reddit about a 5-minute car ride. And
I think it's about
music.
something deeper.
You think so?
I think it's a deeper issue.
What's it about?
I think that someone is driving someone somewhere and they never get anything from them. And so therefore they think that their music should be priority regardless.
Yeah.
And therefore they want to play their music and then feel hurt that the other person brought that attitude with them into the other car.
There's resentment going on all sides.
And yes, resentment's always
Eats
bad.
away at your soul, Sue. Eats away. Okay, let's go to Ron in Worcester. What do you think, Ron?
Well, I'm going with the majority of
Yeah.
this. I think the passengers just are idiots.
A-holes and idiots.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Ron. You seem to be, that is the consensus. We should set this up one more time. This is one of our Am I the A-hole things, and who's supposed to have control of the music in the car. And this person writes in, because they apparently are very concerned about this. They have 2 friends. One of them really likes hardcore rap music. John, can we hear the hardcore rap music again, please, to set the tone?
I just have to say, this is not necessarily the hardest core rap music.
Though, if you're falling asleep in the car, if you're driving down the Mass Pike and it's 11 o'clock at night, you can put that on and be bouncing around your seat. It would keep you awake. But anyway, so that's the hardcore rap example we're showing you. We don't know exactly what the rap was. But anyway, and this person can't stand the music. But nonetheless, when she's in the car getting a ride with this person, she blares that rap music, and the passenger person says she tolerates it because it's her car. She'll complain about it, she'll joke about it, but she'll put up with it. But when the shoe is on the other foot, and the person that doesn't like the hardcore rap music is driving, she thinks that she should be able to play whatever music she wants. And the same friend that blasts the hardcore rap music is ticked off about it.
Yeah.
There's a problem there,
There's
isn't
a problem. There's a deeper problem here.
Maybe one of them stole the other's boyfriend or something like that.
All
I
right,
don't
let's
know.
go to Karen. Hey, Karen, where are you calling us from?
Hey, I'm down in Vero Beach having a little vacation.
Good for you.
But I know that I love your half hour 1:30 to 2.
Oh, thank you.
So
Thank you.
You're very welcome, local woman. the driver's the boss, obviously. I enjoy in other people's cars when they're playing great music. I put on a soundtrack to Grosse Pointe Blank for my grandchildren, which has a lot of 80s music, and they actually like it now. But the reason I called with the music conversation, one of your bumper songs is If You Want Trouble by Nick Waterhouse, which is a great theme song for you guys.
Oh.
And If You Want Trouble, if you Google it, and it is your bumper music. It was also used for a trailer for the most recent season of Fargo.
Okay, is that our new bumper music or is that our old bumper music? I don't even know.
No, it's the one. Bam, 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 bam,
Oh, the old music.
the old one.
Yeah, we get in trouble for that. The copyright issues, That's why we have to.
No.
Yeah, that's why we had to
Well, you
change
can
them.
We also can't play the
Really?
Brazilian
Nick
song
Waterhouse.
again.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't even know. I feel like I just heard it like a month ago.
You
You
did.
did,
We
you
just
did.
changed. We just changed this week, and we're getting a lot of complaints, Karen. Although we're trying to fine tune it to make it a little bit better. I think we're going to arrive at the perfect.
You know what, Karen? The good news is that our entire law and order and judicial system is crumbling. And since the president isn't paying attention to court orders, why should we? Right? I mean,
Exactly.
so let's just look at the lawlessness for us to be able to play whatever copywritten music that we want without fear. No, I'm only kidding. We won't do that. But, that's the kind of viewpoint I'm taking these days, Marjorie.
Yeah, a lot of people are also saying, as you made the point, Sue, if it's a 5-minute drive, why don't you just turn up the radio and have a conversation? Susie, how you doing? Maggie, how are the kids? How's your
Or
significant
just
other?
have the passenger just look at their phones like the rest of us. I mean,
Yeah.
what the heck is, I don't
Yeah,
understand
Elisa
what all of this
in
is
Brighton
about.
just hit the nail on the head here. She says, oh my God, only 5 minutes? Why is this even a thing? And lots of people, of course, are saying that they should be listening to Boston Public Radio. And of course, I think that's right. Lee in Acushnet. Hi, Lee.
Hey, how are you?
Great. Thanks for calling.
I don't think it should be the driver. I know I'm the odd man out, but I think that a lot of people actually like being the driver, and they're giving up the control. Everybody that I'm friends with wants to be the driver, and the people that are giving up the driving spot feel like they're giving something up and kind of giving into that person already by letting them be the driver. So then they get to pick the music too.
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought of that.
And then the other thing, when I'm say if it's going to be longer than 5 minutes, I would say that 90% of the time, whether I'm the driver or the passenger, I make a playlist based on who's in the car.
Oh, wow. That's very thoughtful.
You are very thoughtful. You must do the best things at the potluck dinners, Lee.
You look at your relationship. You do like a go down memory lane of our friendship.
Yeah.
And you put all the songs together of our times together. And then they can't really complain because then they look like a jerk that they don't appreciate your playlist. So best of both worlds.
I like it. So it's both aggressive and friendly at the same time.
Now, Lee, have you got the honey of the ham and all the fixins all set for Easter? Are you ahead of the game on that too?
No, I'm not at all.
Okay. All right. Okay. I always get nervous. Yeah. Well, because some people that would be that thoughtful are thoughtful about everything, and they're organized about everything. Lee, that was a great call from down in the Acushnet. Unlike those who get frantic the day before, which would be what I end up doing.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're frantically coloring the eggs and doing all those things last minute. And
well, a lot of people are coloring potatoes this year instead of coloring eggs because the eggs are so expensive.
Oh,
did you see that?
I did not see that.
Yes, maybe that could be something you could talk about tomorrow with Jim.
The potato eggs. I'm not sure how that works. Potatoes are rather large.
You get the small little
little pearl potatoes.
Oh,
okay.
And then you color those, and instead it's a kind of an Irish famine Easter instead of the egg. Exponentially expensive, highest egg cost ever.
Are you a famine family? Did your family come here during the famine?
No. Well, no. Some of us did. Some of us didn't.
Yeah.
Some of us came earlier, and some of us, yes. But we never talked about the famine, so I didn't learn about it until I was about my mid-20s.
Me
so
too.
there you go. I have no idea.
Famine? I had no idea. It's such a cliche that it's true. Not talking about anything, isn't it? The Irish kind of thing. Ian and Hyannis, what do you think, Ian?
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Basically, because I've got a tin ear and very little good taste in music, I let whoever's riding with me choose it all.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Well, that's very gracious of you too, Ian. Somebody said in a text a little while ago, I lost it now, but they said, I assume if somebody puts the radio on, they don't want to talk to me. So maybe that's a thing too. Because you know how some people feel very funny about silences in the car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't want to sit there, especially if it's just two people that don't know each other that well. You know, do you want to have that silence, or do you want to break the ice or the uncomfortableness with the radio?
Well, here's an archaic opinion as well. I mean, it used to be you would fight over the radio station, right, for music that you got in, right?
That's right.
And now there's certainly satellite issues, and you could listen to YouTube stations and your Apple Music or your playlist from Spotify. There's a million ways to be surprised about what you hear. I mean, the great thing about listening to top 40 radio or album-oriented rock back in the day was you didn't know what was coming up next because it was picked by someone else and surprised. And now you've got this whole idea that I'm going to get in and play my music, and you're going to know every song that you're playing, and the person next to you could like it or not like it.
And you
It's a
worked in
wild
the
time.
radio business when they did do that.
Indeed.
Did you ever get to pick the music?
I did. I was the music director at Kiss 108.
Really?
From the 1983 to 86-ish.
Okay, well, Kiss 108 is usually popular, so you must have made popular choices.
I
Sue.
did indeed. I was, I peaked very young, and now here I am.
But I thought the Kiss 108 thing that they often did was they had music for the little teeny boppers.
Yes,
and
we
music
did. We
that
had day
moms would like. That
we
were like
day parted it. So, like, during the day, we would play Motown, and we'd play that kind of stuff. And then at night, we would play this aggressive rap.
There you go.
So there you go.
Listen, one more, before we talk to Jared, just one more. Nancy in Rhode Island has got this whole thing figured out. You know what she says? She says, I only let people in my car who want to listen to the same music as I do. No problem. Ha, ha, ha.
There you go. That's kind of like the Trump aspect.
That's
you can
right.
only work for me if you're going to tell me how much you love me.
Okay,
and
Jared.
Speaking of love, Jared Bowen is here.
Jared
Hi,
Bowen
Jared.
is here.
Good to see
And
you.
we always like to ask Jared what he thinks of the issue of the day. So
the issue
where
of the-
are you, please, on the
Okay.
music in the car?
So I have thoughts. So it's all based around control, of course. So
Mhm.
I'm usually driving because control. So my theory is if I'm driving, then the co-pilot operates the radio. However, I remain the right.
You reserve the right.
Reserve the right.
I'm here for you.
I've got to get it together before this show at 2:00 to say my ears are bleeding. Change the channel.
Yeah.
So you have, and you also, if you're the co-pilot and you're operating the radio, you can't just change mid-song either.
No, and it's like, also genres of music are usually okay unless you really hate a genre.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. Good.
I like
I
that.
like all the
though.
genres. Yeah.
So you have a middle of the road sort of position.
I do.
I'm interested in do you ever let someone else drive, Jared, or?
What? What do you mean?
Okay. All right. So,
No, that's not true sometimes.
So what are you doing?
So we're going to be talking, there's a big queer food fest coming to
heard about
Boston,
that.
which is super fun. So we're going to be talking about this because this is unveiled in about a week or so. So Tiffany Faison is here. There's something in my eye all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Is it a
floating on
tear?
this? No.
You can see me? No? Okay.
It is a tear for seeing you. So Tiffany Faison will be here to talk about it. She's part of it, of course. And
I
then
love her.
co-founder David Lewis is also here to talk about everything that's happening because it's not just about tastings. It's about conversations and cocktails and all sorts of events. Super fun.
When is it at?
It's happening all across the city.
When?
Oh, when? God, I've got to get it together before.
You'll have to
before
tune
2:00.
in. You'll have to tune in to find out,
Yeah,
Marjorie.
it starts at the end of April and goes to the beginning of May.
Oh, cool.
And then we're speaking with the historian Sean Osborne about the Patriots of Lexington, the Black Patriots of Lexington, because he has done all of this research to understand the Black Americans who are or soon to be Americans, who are on the ground, either fighting or witness to history in Lexington. We'll talk about that. And then Mary Grant, our beloved president of Mass Art, is here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's wonderful. And that Mass Art is such a great school. I don't think a lot of people know it's a state school. So you get a little bit of a break financially going to Mass Art right there on Huntington Avenue, right in the middle of all the hubbub
Great
and everything.
little campus. It's got some great, the Triangle area is wonderful down there.
And so many great artists have come out of there. So, of course, we'll talk about what's happening with universities, or at least one standing up.
Okay, here's our new ending music. Go ahead, Sue.
Okay, I'll take us out then.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye,
Thank you
Jared.
very much, Jared.
Thanks for
Jared's on right after us.
Thanks for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can stay with us 24/7 with the podcast or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, Jim and Marjorie at the BPL for Live Music Friday. the band Twisted Pine ahead of their town and city festival in Lowell. I will be there tomorrow to talk about the Karen Reed trial. Boston Medical Center's Dr. Catherine Gergen Barnett and Callie Crossley and Yahoo Miller will be the press play folks. So thanks to the crew, Zoe, Aiden, Nicole, Hannah, and our engineer, John the Claw Parker, and Jamie, and special thanks to Patrick Lally for running the YouTube screen. You want to say goodbye for the final time?
I do. Thank
there?
you very much for tuning in, Sue. Thank you very much for coming in.
Love
It's
being
always
here.
so much fun to co-host with you. Jim will be back
at ya.
tomorrow, as you said, and I much appreciate your coming in. I much appreciate people listening to us today and all the great calls and all the great texts. Have a great afternoon.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.